Hello everyone and welcome once again to the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison of MoeGamer.net and today I am full of apple crumble.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty nice. We went out for breakfast dessert today as me and the wife had been fancying dessert all week and we discovered that Deliveroo deliver desserts to our area now, but they charge a fortune for it, so we decided we'd just go out for dessert for breakfast today. So we did. It's just nice. I am joined once again by my good friend and colleague, Mr. Chris Kasky of MrGilderPixels.com.
Hello.
Hello. How are you
I'm
doing
full
today?
of pecan pie because of Thanksgiving.
Excellent. Yes, so no such excuse over here. We just felt like stuffing our faces. So, all good.
Never
Right.
a bad time for baked goods.
Indeed. So, you had any good Black Friday deals?
Yeah, I kinged out pretty good. I got Assassin's Creed Origins, because I just got a new 4K TV and I'm going to be getting a PS4 Pro, so I'm really tickled by the idea of exploring ancient Egypt in 4K.
Yep.
So I got Assassin's Creed Origins, I got Injustice 2, the complete edition, so I can play Hellboy and the Ninja Turtles, which I'm very excited about.
Nice.
I got Burnout Paradise Remaster for the PS4. And I got the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection because I'm very excited to be able to play Alpha 3 without having to hook my Dreamcast up. Mm-hmm. And I got Sonic Forces for the Switch, all for under $100 all together. So that's a pretty good haul.
So you made out with a bunch of old games, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, $20 or less a piece. That's what I use with most, with what big name Western public stuff by EA and Ubisoft and Warner Brothers and all the big publisher stuff. I usually wait for $20 and under Black Friday deals because it's not like that stuff ever gets rare. So I just kind of wait and then I king out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's dead easy to get a lot of that stuff for under a tenner in some cases these days, depending on how old it is. So. Yeah, I haven't actually bought anything for Black Friday this year, which surprises me because there's a few things I've had my eye on, but I just haven't sort of quite felt the urge to push myself over the edge at the minute. I'm trying to convince my wife to get herself a Nintendo Switch, and I think I'm almost there, but not quite. I think I'm almost there, but just needs a little more persuading. But
Switch house, that's a good time.
Yes, indeed. I just figured it. Well, we've had some nice sort of bits of money from parents and things for because my wife's birthday is in mid-November, and then we've had some money for Christmas, and we've had some money for sort of doing our house up a bit and that sort of thing as well. So we've got a bit of money to spend, and I just think she'd enjoy it because I mean at the moment she plays a lot of Final Fantasy 14 and she plays a lot of tablet games. I just think there's a lot of stuff on Switch that will appeal to her that I've already got as well. And the nice thing about collecting physical versions is that we wouldn't have to buy them again, which is nice.
Yeah,
so
and the eShop's got so much good stuff on it these days.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, she likes sort of puzzle games and stuff. So we've already got Puyo Puyo Tetris and Soldam and a few other bits and bobs as well. She's vaguely interested in Pokemon Let's Go as well. She played through Pokemon Sun when it came out on the 3DS and enjoyed it a lot more than she expected, so worth a look. Anyway, right, should we talk about some news?
Yes, let's.
Yeah, there's not been a huge amount going on recently, but there's still a few stories we can talk about a little bit. So, let's kick off with this first story, which is Microsoft have apparently acquired inXile Entertainment and Obsidian. So this was announced at Microsoft's XO18 thing. So inXile are the guys behind Bard's Tale, Wasteland 2, and Obsidian. Probably best known these days for Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Fallout New Vegas. And then what have they done recently? Was Pillars of Eternity was them, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was their big, let's try to reboot the old style of PC games that everyone loves us for.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, what do you think about this?
Well, it's, I mean, as someone who doesn't have or doesn't plan on buying an Xbox One, it's a little sad to me because I do generally enjoy Obsidian's output. I really like their writing and sense of humor. I know, we've been complaining and joking around about Fallout a lot over the past couple days because of the release of 76 and all that, but New Vegas is kind of the shining gem of modern Fallout in terms of story and world building. So it does make me sad that I might lose access to Obsidian games on console.
Yeah, I was going to say most Microsoft stuff comes to, at the very least, the Microsoft Store these days, and I think they've kind of twigged that they're not really going to ever dethrone Steam as well. So a lot of Microsoft published stuff now also comes to Steam as well. So the only slightly awkward thing for some PC gamers who haven't upgraded yet is that a lot of Microsoft published stuff requires Windows 10 these days. I mean, well, that's an issue to some people and not to others. So. But, Obsidian and In Exile, I've never been hugely attached to either of them. I mean, I've enjoyed some Obsidian games, but they're not my favourite experiences by any means. I enjoyed their South Park game. That was really good. That was a really pleasant surprise, actually, quite how good that was.
You liked Alpha Protocol, didn't you, too? You really liked Alpha
Protocol.
Protocol.
That's them, isn't it? Yeah, of course. Yeah, Alpha Protocol was cool. That's a game that... That's a funny one, because it's one of those ones that wasn't received all that well when it was first released, and now it's... I wouldn't say sort of universally loved or anything, but it's very much got a cult appeal now for various reasons. Alpha Protocol is I remember back when I played it when it was a bit more current. I described it as out Mass Effecting Mass Effect in terms of the character interaction, and I haven't replayed it recently, but certainly based on my memories of it and sort of video clips that I've watched recently, I would probably stand by that. It's got a really good way of sort of moulding the protagonist to how you respond to situations. And so you're mostly sort of picking attitudes rather than specific lines, which I know a lot of people take the piss out of with sort of simplified dialogue systems in the more recent Fallout games and stuff like that. But it worked really well in Alpha Protocol. So you could play the main character as a complete arsehole if you wanted to, or you could do him as this sort of smooth, suave James Bond type thing. And while you'd still go through the same major story beats, the actual sort of context of it would change very much based on how you'd been playing the protagonist. So, yeah, that was a highlight of their back catalogue. Other stuff, Knights of the Old Republic 2, I didn't love because I've never been sort of a huge Star Wars guy, and sort of at the time I played Knights of the Old Republic 2, it was sort of while it was still in a bit of a state.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's also the other side of Obsidian games.
Yes.
They're kind of perpetually in a state.
Yes, and I mean, I've said to you before that if there's a game that needs extensive modding to make worth playing, I'm kind of inclined to not play it in the first place. So I know a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that and say I'd miss out on a bunch of great experiences there, but you know, I just can't be bothered.
No, me neither. There's plenty of games out there I can play that I don't need to put that much work into. And I think back to our horror episode when you were telling me about like all the hoops you had to jump through to play that modded version of that Fatal Frame.
Yeah,
and I was
I suppose I'm making myself sound like a bit of a hypocrite there, aren't I? But
well, it's all about how much you care about the experience. If you really want to play that specific game, you're going to go through the work. But to me, it's just like, I'll just go play something I can turn on and play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we consider something like a Bethesda game, I've played enough of those now to know that I don't really enjoy the base Bethesda game experience, so I'm not going to go out of my way to mod it just to make it into something that I might enjoy a little bit more. So, whereas Fatal Frame 4, I knew it was going to be something that I would enjoy. So, yeah, it was worth the effort in that case. But and also, in that case, it actually wasn't a huge amount of effort either because, well, my Wii was already soft modded to play import games anyway, and so it was pretty much just a case of copying some files onto an SD card, so that wasn't too difficult at all. But anyway, right, moving on. Do you want to talk a bit about Destiny Connect?
I sure do, because it looks like a lot of fun. So we have a new RPG coming from Nippon Ichi, and it looks adorable. Destiny Connect is a time travel focused RPG with a very kind of cartoony CG anime style that's kind of inspired a bit by it almost has a little bit of a Western Euro comic flavor to it in a lot of ways.
Yes.
It's already kind of gotten some flack for not looking anime enough, but I think it looks lovely. Everything kind of has a very toy-like sheen to it, so it almost doesn't look like a game so much as it looks like kind of toys in a diorama.
Yeah.
And we don't know too much about it, but it's kind of got it's clear that they're going for a very whimsical child fairy tale kind of setting here. So the game is set in Clockney, which and the characters include a curious young girl named Sherry, Isaac, a mecha that Sherry found in her father's room with the ability to time travel, and her childhood friend Pegrio, who is a shy worrywart. So I love games that are kind of whimsical and kind of child fairy tale influenced, so this really is on my radar.
Yeah, I really like sort of the time travel concept as well. I know it's something that's quite difficult to get right, but this sounds like it's sort of got quite a strong focus on visiting the same areas in different time periods. They say sort of the key concept behind it is sort of the Y2K bug.
Cool.
And how people had to deal with that, and all the sort of behind the scenes work they had to go into that, because obviously the Y2K bug ended up being absolutely nothing to worry about whatsoever. But
that was only because of hard work that people put in to fix it before it was an issue.
Yeah, exactly. All the preventative measures that people put in place. But I've talked a bit about Shadow of Memories on here before, and on MoeGamer as well, and that uses sort of the same concept of visiting the same areas throughout different time periods, and having making something happen in the past, and that having an effect on what happens in the future, and that sort of thing. So if it involves that sort of thing, then yeah, I'm going to be very happy indeed. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's getting a slight, almost like a Gravity Rush vibe from some of the visuals as well. With
absolutely.
With sort of the colour scheme and the European architecture and that sort of thing. It looks very sort of Germanic in some ways.
Yeah, you know what? I get a Professor Layton vibe off it.
Yes, that's probably a good... Yeah.
Which is a series of games I don't particularly like to play, but I love the look. I love the look and setting of.
Yes.
Most importantly, the director for the game, Yoshihiko Toda, says that the game is turning out to be a game that has a similar vibe to the golden age of RPGs for the Super Famicom and games that were released in the 90s. So that's what we want to hear.
Yes.
Classic turn-based, command-based battles. Good stuff. Going to be one worth looking out for.
Excellent. So the JRPG is coming back, is it? It's coming back.
It's coming back again, even though it never went away, and comes back every year.
Exactly. All right, so that is due to arrive in Japan in February of next year. So they're currently about 3/4 of the way through developing that at the moment, apparently. So there are a few more screenshots, and I'm not sure if there's been a trailer yet, but there's certainly been a few more screenshots of snuck out since we first saw the announcement of that, which is nice. Alright, moving on. Battle Princess Madeline is coming to Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One and PC in December of this year, and to Wii U and Vita in 2019, apparently.
Which is cool.
Yes! I recognise the name of this game for some reason, but I can't remember why. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, it was a big Kickstarter, darling.
Oh, was that it? Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago, back in 2017, it was a pretty well circulated Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. The whole thing about Battle Princess Madeline is this game designer who loves old school games. He's a pixel artist by trade, and he used to like to play Ghouls and Ghosts, or Ghosts and Goblins, or whatever the heck version. And his daughter asked him one day, like, what would it... I wish there was a version of this where I could be a girl, where I could be a princess. So he was like, all right, I'm gonna make a game for my daughter. and so he made basically his take on a Ghost and Goblin style platformer with a female protagonist.
Nice. And
it's just adorable. Great pixel art. There's some cool animated like story cinematics and stuff now. Yeah. And I believe Limited Run or one of those houses was kind of attached to it to do physical presses of it later. Yes,
that sounds right.
So it's one of those indie games. Whenever I see an indie game with pretty pixel art, I always try to make sure to throw a shout out on here for, and I think that's going to be one worth looking out for. Yeah,
this looks really cool actually. I mean, like the art style, he seems to have really nailed that Ghosts and Goblins look. Definitely, it looks like basically a new Ghosts and Goblins game in many ways. So, yeah, definitely want to take a look at. So there's some trailers around for that at the moment. Wii U and Vita ports in 2019. Yeah, good on them. Good on them. All for keeping them alive. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on then. Apparently, Hollow Knight's physical copies have been cancelled for some reason. So what happened here?
They basically said that it was like too much because they're a very small development team, and it was just too much for them to handle.
Yeah.
Working to get those physical copies made and press ready while also continuing to work on update and maintain the game.
Yeah.
Now, they have said that they're not ruling out the existence of physical copies eventually, likely through one of the limited press houses.
Mm-hmm.
But just the work involved in creating an actual retail mass press published version was proving to be too much for the studio to handle.
Okay. Oh, well, that's a shame, because I know Hollow Knight's been quite well received. I haven't played it myself, but I know a lot of people have enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was very excited for this, which is why I kind of flagged it as something to talk about. So
yeah,
it'll be worth keeping an ear to the ground for if limited run or strictly limited or someone picks it up later.
Yeah.
But it looks like we're not getting the retail copy we were promised.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Okay, moving on. Just a little story. This it probably doesn't affect a lot of Western players, but I thought it was an interesting thing anyway. Konami is closing down one of its mobile games in January of 2019 called Tokimeki Idol. But the interesting thing about this is not the fact that they are closing down this game. It's the fact that when it has closed down, they're going to update it to an offline version, so you can carry on playing it. Yeah,
it's the best.
This is not something I recall seeing happen before with a mobile game in particular, and it's something I know a lot of people would be keen to see happen with
every mobile game ever.
Every mobile game ever, but also things like MMOs and stuff as well. So there's a bunch of dead MMOs out there that people would love to see either resurrected with fan servers or just still playable offline. So I think sort of my favourite example from sort of my own personal gaming history would be City of Heroes, which was a fantastic game that unfortunately died out. There are still efforts to try and resurrect that in one way, and there's also someone working on a kind of successor to it as well, but we haven't heard anything sort of really concrete about that or when that's going to happen. So yeah, City of Heroes is something that a lot of people would love the opportunity to play again. Smartphone games, I don't know, some people get really attached to them, and especially if you've pumped a lot of money into them, it's obviously going to be a bummer for them to shut down and all of that stuff that you've earned or achieved or bought to be down the toilet. But
you know what game this happened with? While you were talking, I was trying to think of Aglia. So that was a mobile game that was developed by Brownie Brown, which are the people who handle the Secret of Mana games.
Oh, okay.
For Square Enix, but they made this game called Aglia. I think it's called Aglia Lost.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a pretty good high production value mobile game, and when the actual online component went under, they patched it and modified it to be a completely offline experience.
Yeah, and that's cool. Because, I mean, in a lot of cases, there's no reason why these games couldn't work offline. I mean, there's no reason why you can't just download all of the data. You can still have, like, the gacha function and stuff in there, just like it's implemented in something like Xenoblade or something like that. So
yeah, they just changed the rate that you get the drops and stuff, so because you can't buy the premium currency anymore.
Yeah. So, yeah, in a lot of cases, I mean, obviously stuff like Dragalia Lost and Grand Blue Fantasy, they have the multiplayer co-op component in there, but the actual main bulk of the game, the main story, and even some of the events and stuff, there's no need for them to be online. So yeah, hopefully we'll see a bit more of this happening going forward, but you never know. But interesting that it's Konami doing it after sort of everyone whinging at Konami, but you know, it's not one of their most well-known games or anything, but yes. Anyway,
it's like we said when we did our Konami episode. Konami's making some weird decisions, and when I say weird decisions, I mean good decisions lately. So uncharacteristic of Konami decisions. So who knows? I really think there's been some shakeups and new people.
Yeah, sounds plausible. All right, moving on. The new No More Heroes game, Travis Strikes Again, is going to have a physical edition in North America and Europe. And the physical release, because this was sort of developed primarily as a digital game, the physical version is actually going to include the season pass with it as well.
Yeah.
Which is a really nice way of doing it, I think. So, and this could work for a lot of other digital-only games as well. So if you think of like sort of Indie Create stuff, like a physical version of something like Mighty Gunvolt Burst or Blaster Master or something like that, if it was a physical copy that then came with all the DLC and stuff, yeah, that would be an ideal way of doing it. So this is really cool to.
I thought this was worth bringing to our attention because a while ago we talked about how cool it was with when Nintendo released Torna, Xenoblade 2, the Torna expansion.
Yes.
So they released a premium-priced retail copy of the Torna expansion, which included the DLC season pass for the original Xenoblade. And we said, hey, this is a really cool idea. It's not ideal, but at least it's something. And and we kind of said when we talked about that we hoped this was a sign of Nintendo kind of doing this kind of consumer-friendly practice more in the future. So when I saw this news about Travis Strikes Again, I noticed that Nintendo is publishing the physical copy.
Yes.
So this is them doing, again, the same thing they did with Torna. Basically giving you an incentive to buy that premium-priced retail copy by including the DLC season pass.
Yeah, and as I've said before, Nintendo seem to be pretty wise to this now. They seem to be aware that there is a hunger for physical versions of stuff that might be sort of digital only in practice. So, like we've previously talked about, like the printable Switch inlays that they've done for things like the Octo expansion for Splatoon 2 and stuff like that as well. So, yeah, Nintendo seem to have the right idea with this. So that's all good.
Also, No More Heroes, January 18th. Huzzah!
Yes,
I love this series.
I still haven't played it. I've got the 2 Wii games on my shelf, but I haven't actually tried them yet. So, like I've said before, Grasshopper Manufactory is a bit of a black spot in my knowledge. I do need to actually sit down and spend some time with their games at some point, and sort of get a feel for what they're all about. I mean, I've got an idea of some of their characteristics from playing Project 04, but yeah, so some of sort of the stuff that is specifically their own work, specifically Suda's own work, and getting a feel for that. Because like, I own loads of Grasshopper Manufacturer games, I just haven't played them yet.
Do you have a contact for the DS?
No, that is one I would like to get, actually. That's the one where sort of different things happen on each screen, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really interesting... That's kind of... Suda's all about kind of mixing up genres and asking questions and breaking the fourth wall. And Contact was his attempt to do that with an RPG, like a 16-bit style RPG, like an Earthbound kind of thing. And it's really quite a curious, wonderful game.
Yeah, that is one I do want to try and pick up at some point, but it's proving quite hard to find. But I'm sure it'll turn up eventually. All right, continuing, we have the Game Paradise Cruisin Mix Special is launching on November the 30th, which actually isn't that far away now. It's next Friday at the time of recording?
Yeah.
So, for the unfamiliar, this is a super hyper goofy shoot 'em up. It's being published by Dejiga Games for PlayStation 4 and PC. Do you know much else about this? Because I just know it's pretty crazy and cartoony and looks like a lot of fun, but I don't know a lot of its background.
So in the same way that Parodius is Konami's kind of parody shooter that pulls characters and properties from like all the history of Konami, Game Paradise Cruisin Mix was for the arcade and the Saturn back in the day was Jalico attempting to do the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of like big heavy Jalico fans out there, but still it's really neat that this is a thing that exists. So like a lot of the characters and stages and stuff are kind of just references to Jalico's history as a developer. Right. And it's just goofy because it's almost like the story is kind of like Wreck-It Ralph almost. Like you're kind of going in and out of different arcade games and stuff. Yeah. So the stages are different depending on kind of which arcade game you've been sucked into, or sometimes you're in the arcade and like you're just flying through the arcade itself, and it's just kind of goofy and fun and self-referential. And I like when video games are about video games. So yes, this is one of them. Yeah.
So that looks cool. So that is due out, what do we say, Japan on November 29th and coming over here on the 30th. Worth noting for those who care about such things, apparently the PlayStation 4 version has had some edits to one of the special attacks, I think, because of Sony's fear of boobies. But the Steam version is, as ever, uncut. There's also going to be a limited run games version of the PS4 version. There's a special edition that comes with some extra characters, an art book, an anime OVA from 1997 on DVD, and 2 soundtrack CDs and some replica flyers as well. So that looks like a pretty nice special edition if you're interested in that kind of thing. So I'm going to be having a look at that, definitely, because I like a shoot 'em up, I like a self-referential game, and if it's Jalico, there's a possibility the written Tam from Rodland in there might be somewhere. So
it's very possible.
All right, continuing on then. Namco Bandai announced a game called Ninja Box. I haven't looked at this at all, so I'll let you speak on this one.
I just thought it was curious because I had read the news on it, and it has like a cute, cartoony aesthetic, so obviously I'm all about it. And when I had read the descriptions, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of another Minecraft Me Too clone kind of thing. But they're describing it as a secret base building RPG. And when I looked at the footage, it didn't look like Minecraft. It looks like Fortnite.
Okay.
So you're collecting materials, and instead of building things like cube by cube, I think you're literally just building the components. So like staircase, wall, dresser, so you're building your secret base with these components out of materials you collect. And because it's kind of also a Japanese RPG, I think it'll probably be a bit more single player friendly, kind of in the same way that I really appreciated Dragon Quest Builders. Basically took a more focused approach to Minecraft's style of gaming. So I'm hoping that this Ninja Box will take some of the things I do think are intriguing about Fortnite and applying it to a genre and a style of game that I'm more interested in. It just looks curious.
Yeah, it's got cute art as well. So yeah, it looks like that could be a lot of fun actually. So yeah, one to watch on that. There's no release date for that yet, but there is a trailer now, as well as some screenshots around the place, so check those out if you want to know a bit more. Do you want to talk about Devil May Cry on Netflix?
I do.
Go on then.
Just that for a while, the people behind the Netflix Castlevania series were hinting that they had scored another big property, and they couldn't talk about it for a while. A lot of people thought it was going to be Zelda. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it's Devil May Cry. So we're going to be getting a Devil May Cry animated series from the same people behind the excellent Castlevania animated series. And I'll be curious to see what that turns out like, because there already was a Devil May Cry anime, and it was pretty good. Yeah. So I don't know what this is going to be like as opposed to the Devil May Cry anime, but I'm excited because Castlevania was wonderful, and they've proven that they know how to treat a franchise with respect. So I'm excited to see what it looks like.
Yeah, so the guy behind it, Adi Shankar, is describing it and Castlevania as what he calls his bootleg multiverse. So he hasn't sort of specifically said that there's going to be explicit links between the Devil May Cry and Castlevania series, but there's presumably going to be some things in common, like art style and stuff, and obviously the potential for crossover as well. With the subject matter of Devil May Cry and Castlevania, there's sort of potential for that sort of thing. And also, I think the thing I loved most about it was his comment that he picked up the Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry writes himself, so I quote, "So the jabronis in Hollywood don't fuck this one up too."
Yeah, I love it. He's great. He's great. He actually cares, and it's really refreshing.
Yeah. So, good on him for that. Definitely. All right, a couple more things. Inti Creates confirmed at Anime NYC recently that Dragon Mark for Death, which is their new sort of action RPG side-scroller pixel art game that is on the way, that is coming on the 31st of January 2019 in North America and Europe, and they've also confirmed a physical release for it as well, which made me very happy indeed. Not a lot.
Has the physical release been confirmed for Western territories too?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Last time I read that it was only the Japanese.
Yes, so it's it was announced on their English Twitter. So yeah, it appears that that we are getting the physical version of this as well.
Sweet baby. I was going to import it.
So the way this is going to be sold, digitally, it's going to be sold as 2 separate packs of $14.99 each. So one of them is going to have the frontline fighters, so that contains the Empress and Warrior characters, who are supposedly more friendly to beginner players, and they are sort of DPS and tank types. And then the second pack is the Advanced Attackers pack that contains the Shinobi and Witch characters, who are more complicated to play as. You can buy either one first and then buy the other one as DLC if you want to. If you buy the physical version, that will have all 4 characters available from the start. So they haven't confirmed that that's going to be out on the same day as the digital version, but they're apparently aiming to have it as close to the digital release date as possible. So, and that's the reason why they're releasing it on January the 31st, to try and sort of minimise that gap as much as possible. So watch out for that in probably early February. At retail, I guess, is what that's looking like.
The art style for this one is really unique. I'm super excited about it.
Yes, definitely. All right, you've got a couple more stories, so fire away.
Yeah, a new Super Robot Wars coming. Super Robot Wars T, for the Super Robot Wars fans out there. The coolest news about it is that there's some really neat new properties being added that have never appeared in a Super Robot Wars game before. Most notably, I guess some of the ships from Cowboy Bebop, which is tremendously cool. Also, Magic Knight Ray Earth, which is really, really neat, because the robots from Magic Knight Ray Earth are beautiful.
I didn't realize there were robots in that at all.
Oh, yeah. The pretty girls
fantasy.
Get giant robots.
Sweet.
Yeah, they're really, really cool looking. Yeah, I love Magic Knight Ray Earth, so very excited to see them getting integrated into that. And as has been the case with the last few Super Robot Wars, there will be an Asian region English language release. So it will be available if you want to order it and enjoy all the robot smashy action.
I'm kind of surprised this doesn't come west officially now, because
it's impossible because of the licensing.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but yeah, because I mean, there's an established market for it clearly, because everyone goes nuts every time a new one of these gets announced, and everyone's been really, really happy that the last few have had Asia English releases. But yeah, I guess the licensing must be an absolute nightmare. It's
impossible. But we do occasionally get so Super Robot Wars has 2 series that run, right? There's the traditional Super Robot Wars, and then there's the Super Robot Wars OG games, which is original generation. And original generation games don't have the famous robots in it.
Yeah,
it's just an original storyline with newly designed robots, many of which are tributes to classic robots from anime, but they are original. So occasionally we'll get original generation games in the West, because there's no licensing nightmares. So like we did, there was a series on the Game Boy Advance back in the day, and we got those. Actually, I think that was the last time, but that has happened. But we never get the proper games with Mazinger and all the other robots.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last story then is that there's going to be a new version of Dead or Alive Extreme 3 called Dead or Alive Extreme Scarlet. This is coming for PS4 and Switch. Is there a release date for this yet? March 20th in Japan. No word on an Asian English version, I don't think, but there was for the previous one, so entirely possible. So this version features all of the girls from the base game, which is Kasumi, Momiji, Hitomi, Helena, Mary Rose, Honoka, Neo Tango, Kokoro, and Ayane. It also adds Misaki from Dead or Alive Extreme Venus Vacation, which is the free-to-play one on PC, I think.
Yeah, the browser-based one, I think.
Yes, and then they're adding one more character who they haven't revealed yet, and that's going to be new to Scarlet version. So the Nintendo Switch version incorporates what they call a soft 4D engine that combines the existing engine for sort of the body modelling in Dead or Alive and Dead or Alive Extreme, which has always been very good for. It's mostly known for its breast jiggles, to be fair, but In general, it's a great engine for character modeling in general, because like you can do things like sort of see muscles moving, and clothing can get disheveled, characters can get wet and sweaty and that sort of thing as well. So it's a very good engine for modeling that side of things. The Switch version, they are combining all the things that engine does well already with Nintendo Switch HD Rumble, which they describe they are attempting to provide the feeling of various jiggles to go with the visuals of the soft engine. The developers say players will get to experience a new kind of jiggling experience, with the left and right Joy-Cons having their own movement and vibrations.
Yeah, it's worth noting that you'll have to make a pretty hard decision here whether or not you want the PS4 version with its full VR support,
Yes.
but it's going to be censored.
Yes.
Like there's going to be omitted features and omitted outfits from the PS4 version. So the Switch version is going to have all that, but obviously you won't have the VR compatibility. So
yes, so the stuff that's going to be missing from the PS4 version are the items that you can use to deliberately loosen the girls' outfits, because normally the outfits sort of get loosened by activity. So like if you get a bit rambunctious in one of the mini games or something, that like the bikini will come off a bit and that sort of thing. But yeah, these items would let you sort of do that deliberately. There's also some skincare items. I can't remember exactly what those do, but those won't be in the PS4 version. And some of the DLC costumes will be omitted from the PS4 version as well. So the main reasons you might want to look at this, even if you played the previous one, is that it's apparently it's a bit easier to gain money and own a level, so there's a bit less grinding involved in it. And yeah, they say they've made various parts of the game more comfortable and easier to play. Don't know what that means, but yeah. Dead or Alive Extreme 3 was alright. I preferred 2 because it just had more to do in it. Like I really liked the jet skiing and stuff in the second one, but I mean 3 was a nice graphical showcase if nothing else, and it was a nice comfy game to spend a few minutes with. But yeah,
I'm gonna retry it. I mean, I didn't like the PS4 version of 3 much. I kind of actually sold my copy because I was like, I'm never gonna play this again. But there's just something about having it on the Switch that appeals to me more. Maybe because this is such like a passive, relaxed game.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's the kind of game that I would play on the handheld while watching a movie out of the corner of my eye on the TV and relax with. And so it's good for the Switch, I think.
Yeah, I've always thought of this as like a really nice, relaxing series. Like I think of it as like sort of certainly the old versions were definitely the perfect summer game, just because the combination of the cheesy soundtrack, which I absolutely love, by the way. I know it's crap, but I absolutely adore the soundtracks in the Dead or Alive Extreme games. It's just such a wonderfully happy, summery game that like even if you're not sort of going on holiday or anything, you can sort of have that nice sort of sunny, comfy experience where everyone's having fun and having a nice time, and it's just happy. For me, I mean, obviously, it's got pretty girls in it, which is nice, but it's never sort of been about sort of the sexy side of it for me. It's always just been about that really nice, pleasant experience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I will probably look into the Switch version of that as well. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything we've got on our list. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay, good stuff. Oh, actually, one thing I have just spotted last minute. Sega has announced they are doing a Sega Ages version of Outrun for Nintendo Switch, which is nice. So this is not the same as the Sega Ages version, which is on PS2, which is the one with the sort of polygonal graphics. So it sort of plays the same, but it has 3D graphics. This is closer in execution to what they did with the 3DS version a while back. So it will include sort of the ability to sort of tune up your car slightly, so you can fiddle around with the cornering, engine, tyre and bumper parts to change how your car handles, but otherwise it looks very much like the original arcade game, which should be cool. It will have gyro controls as well, so you can play using your Switch as a simulated steering wheel if you want to. If you don't want to, then don't do that. One thing I hope they do add that was in the 3DS version was the 3DS version had this facility that sort of simulated the hydraulic arcade cabinet. Whereas you'd sort of steer around corners, it would actually sort of tilt the entire display from side to side. So if they keep that in on the Switch, I'll be very happy, because that was a really stupid, pointless feature, but it just really added a lot to the 3DS version. So yeah, there is a screenshot of this Sega Ages version that looks like sort of the makes it look like it's displayed on the CRT of the arcade machine. So hopefully that means that feature will be present and correct, but we'll see.
I love stupid, pointless features.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, all right, I think that's everything for now. So let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've been playing recently. So see you in a moment. Welcome back. So for our second segment, we usually talk about what we've been playing recently. Actually, the first thing I'd like to bring up is something that I've been watching recently that I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to, because it's something cool that I've seen develop. I wrote a bit about this on MoeGamer.net recently, and that is the former teletext institution, which is Digitiser. Digitiser was a daily games magazine that ran on the teletext service on UK televisions, which is not something you guys had in America, I believe. But
yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so teletext in a nutshell is a system where, alongside the usual TV broadcasts, they also broadcast text data. So you could press a button on your remote control and you could switch the TV view onto this text display. And you could then, each page of information had a number. You could type in a number and it would then scroll through to that page. It would take a bit of time to load because the different pages were broadcast at different times. So you'd have to sort of wait for the actual broadcast to reach that page again. But there was all sorts of stuff. So like you could get news through there, you could get sporting information. And one of the things on one of the channel's teletext services was this thing called Digitiser, which was a games magazine. And they position themselves as the world's only, or the world's best, daily games magazine. And this was sort of before the internet was a thing. This started in the late 90s, so sort of internet stuff was starting to become a thing. But most people, definitely in the UK, still only had dial-up connections at best, and were often still using closed services like CompuServe and that kind of thing. So this was, at the time, for a lot of people, the most up-to-date way to get gaming news and reviews and that sort of thing. And it became known both for sort of being very honest about things, because they weren't attached to a particular publisher or advertisers. They weren't sort of obliged to be particularly nice to anyone. So they gained a reputation for sort of having very honest reviews of even sort of big releases of the time, which a lot of people grew to respect. But the main thing that people came to Digitiser for was actually not the gaming stuff. It was more sort of the humorous side of things, because it was very sort of irreverently written, often with surreal humour and that kinds of thing. So for those familiar with sort of British magazines like Viz and that kind of thing, it was a similar kind of thing, but without sort of the outright offensive content in there that Viz has. So it was very irreverent, very cheeky. There was a letters page that you'd write in to deliberately get insulted by one of the staff members and that kind of thing. It was just sort of very much an institution for a lot of people in the late 90s and the early 2000s. The guy behind it is a guy called Paul Rose, also known as Mr. Biffo. That was sort of his pen name when he wrote Digitiser. He's been working on a few things over the course of the last few years. He's been writing for TV. He relaunched the Digitiser brand a few years back with his own website called Digitiser 2000. And he's been trying to get people together to produce basically a TV show. He's put it on YouTube, but he's making it like a late 90s TV show, basically. So he's got people together, mostly people who sort of surround the... there's a YouTuber called Stuart Ashen, who he mainly reviews sort of tat from charity shops and stuff, but he really knows his stuff about retro computers and stuff. And excuse me, there's kind of a group of people who kind of congregate around him, I guess, who are sort of attached to him and often do projects with him. And Paul Rose is one of these people who's often done work with him. And so a lot of the people who've come along to work on this Digitiser TV show are sort of quite recognisable YouTube personalities in their own right, but they've come together to produce this show. And at the time of recording, they're just about to put out their third episode, which is yeah, so it's been going well so far. So the first episode had a few rough edges around there because it was obviously Rose trying to kind of find his feet with editing and sound mixing and stuff like that. The second episode was a lot better, and he assures everyone that sort of the third episode is very much the one where they've completely found their feet and got used to it. So the concept of the show is not your average gaming YouTuber type thing. So it's not just like a short show with someone sitting talking about a specific game or a system or something like that. It's designed to be structured like an old magazine style TV show. And so it's got different segments to it. It's got interviews, it's got sort of quizzes, gaming challenges and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just been a really entertaining watch so far. So if you like British humour, particularly sort of chaotic humour, so Rose is very much inspired by Monty Python and Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer. So if you like that kind of surreal humour, you'll probably get a lot out of this show. That is available on YouTube from their channel, which is just Digitiser 2000. So if you search for that, you'll find them. And just wanted to give that a quick plug because I know they've been working really hard on that. They've managed to get a whole bunch of new subscribers from that. Rose has been sort of really struggling to get this Digitiser brand back up and running, but he seems to have sort of nailed what people wanted from it now. So I just wanted to give that a shout out.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, so that's been a really nice success story to watch recently. So do take a look. All right, what have you been up to this week then?
Well, I'm pleased to announce that I have had my first positive virtual reality experience.
Say it ain't so.
It's so. Ladies and gentlemen, Astrobot Rescue Mission for the PS4 is some good shit. Mm-hmm. Really, really good. Finally got a chance to play it at a friend's house over the weekend, and, well, over the middle of the week, I guess, the beginning of the long weekend here in the States. And it is great. And it is great because it is not a game that entirely depends on the fact that it's virtual reality to sell you on it. Mm-hmm. It is a well-constructed, fun, cute, quirky, Japanese-developed platformer game that just happens to be enhanced with VR.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful. There was a real watershed moment for me where I'm running around, I think it was in the second level, and there was a jump I had to make that was obscured by a wall. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is dumb. I can't see where the platform was. And then I physically took a step forward and looked to my right. Like, I actually looked around the wall. Like, put my head... because I didn't even realize that because of the PSVR with the camera and the light sensors built into the VR, there was some spatial awareness as well.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as that happened, and then I looked down and almost threw up because because I was in a valley. I was in a construction site, and I looked down from the crane. And then I was like, oh, shit, this is it. This is VR. Like, this is what VR is now. And it was wonderful. And I almost had a moment of weakness and freaking bought a bundle this weekend. I restrained myself because I said one game alone isn't worth the $200 investment. But it was it was hard to resist because I really enjoy that game. And the music also deserves a special shout out because the music is really good in it too.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, this is a game I've had my eye on for a little while because I've heard nothing negative about it. Everyone who's played it has absolutely loved it, so I'm going to try and pick that up at some point. It's actually quite inexpensive as well, because I think they released it at like 25 quid here, so it's not like a full price game, but it sounds like it's a pretty substantial experience anyway. My experience with related matters is that they did a sort of prototype for what became Astrobot in the Playroom VR.
Right, yeah. It was so well received. I think that's why they made the full version.
Yeah, exactly. So in the Playroom VR, this was a free download for PS4 that had a bunch of VR mini games in it. So there's things like sort of a gun shooter where you're shooting blocks of enemies that are coming towards you. But then there was the Astrobot thing where you control a robot with the DualShock, but then you are effectively taking on the role of a giant robot that is following this robot here, and anyone watching on the TV can see your giant robot looking around as well as the small robot as well, so it could be quite a spectator sport as well. And I had pretty much the same experience as you, sort of getting into a situation where you think, I don't know how to do that, and then having that realization that you can take a step forwards or lean to the side and look round stuff, which are things that people have been trying to do in 3D platformers for years, if they're less experienced with it. But now you can actually do it. Now you can actually look over that ledge or around that corner and see what's there. So yeah. I mean, virtual reality for a lot of people is mostly associated with first-person experiences, but it seems that a lot of the most well-received stuff is taking this approach where, rather than you being in the game, you are the camera. And that seems to be a really good use of VR for a lot of people. So there's been several platform games of this style that take on this idea. So there was that Moss game a while back that seems to have been quite popular.
Yeah, that's the bundle you can get in the States right now.
Yes,
it's you get Moss and Astrobot and the headset, which is a pretty good bundle.
Oh, that's cool. Do you get the camera and the Move controllers as well? Or
you don't get the Move controllers. You get the camera, you get the headset, and then you get a physical copy of Astrobot and a digital code for Moss.
Okay, that's cool.
There's another pack, a more expensive pack you can get in the States right now that has the Creed, the boxing game, and that comes with a pair of Move controllers because you need it. But the Moss and Astrobot's kind of the entry level bundle, and if like you're just wanting to play these platformers, you don't need the Move controllers anyway.
Yeah, so. The Move controllers are quite a sort of specific Move use case, to be honest, because there's very few games that actually need them. But obviously something like Creed, a big part of the experience with that will be the actual sort of physical movements and punching with those. But yeah, there's a lot of games, particularly these sort of more abstract ones where you're taking on the role of the camera rather than actually being in the game world, where you can use just a DualShock thing. So
that's been my experience. The more likely a game is to require the Move controllers, the less likely that's a game I want to play in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a lot of people's hang-ups with it. So it's worth noting if you have been holding back on it because either the requirement for motion controls or the additional expense of getting Move controllers, because let's face it, no one bought them for PS3, did they? So so rest assured that in my experience, a lot of VR games are perfectly playable with the DualShock, and in some cases preferable. So bear that in mind. I'm probably going to try and pick that up in the next few days at some point. So I will hopefully be able to either share some thoughts with you on this podcast or over on MoeGamer.net about that.
Yeah, I'll be very, very curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, I bought a PS4 VR a while back, and I've had some fun with it, but I haven't done much with it recently, so I kind of feel like I want to get some more games for it, because there's a pretty decent library of games you can get for it now, and even better, a lot of them have physical releases as well over here in the UK. I don't know if they've done the same in the US, but a lot of VR games actually have disc-based copies over here, which is really cool to see. So. I'm going to try and pick up a few of those. I'd like to play Resident Evil 7, as that's supposed to be excellent. The Until Dawn game is supposed to be quite good. I know it's pretty much just a rail shooter, but as we'll probably talk about in the third segment of this podcast, VR is a great place to play rail shooters. So, anyway.
Have you played No Heroes Allowed?
No, I haven't. Is that good?
I hope so.
It's played it either.
No, it's one of the. Well, I don't have the VR. Right? It's one of the games I want to play. Because it's cute, and the whole thing is that it's kind of unique in that you're playing the game on a tabletop. You're like playing a tabletop game in the VR. Like you're looking down. You're standing there around the table, and the other characters are there with you, and then you have to look down at the table to play it.
Yeah.
Like you're in a room.
That's a cool idea. That kind of reminds me of like a couple of really old games on like 16-bit stuff. So I don't actually remember. I think it was Bullfrog. So they originally did Populous, which is one of their better known ones from that period.
Sure.
But they also did a game around the same period called Powermonger.
Oh, I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, so it was the same.
It.
It was the same kind of perspective as Populous, so it was sort of isometric map that you could scroll around, and I think you could manipulate the terrain and stuff. But rather than being a god, you were commanding armies in that, so it was more of a sort of real-time strategy game. And a big thing that always stuck with me about the presentation of that is that it. Like this, it was presented as you sort of standing over a table.
Oh, this is cool as hell.
Yeah.
I'm Googling it now.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
So there was a guy standing in the background who I think you could interact with and talk to and get advice from that side of things. So, yeah, that was one of Bullfrog's games that's kind of mostly been forgotten these days, but it was very well received back in the day. But yeah, this what's it called? No Heroes Allowed. Yeah, that concept sounds very similar to that, and that's quite appealing. So,
and it's got cute anime vampire friends.
Excellent. That's what we need. Marvelous. Right. Anything else you've been playing?
Yeah, I recently acquired a copy of Penny Punching Princess.
Oh, yes. Tell me about this.
For the Switch, which is delightful. So, Penny Punching Princess is kind of the best kind of game because it kind of defines genre definitions. It defies them. It's people have been calling it an RPG, but it's not really an RPG because it's mission based. It's just a menu, and it's like you pick one mission and go to the next mission. So it has a lot of characteristics that we associate kind of with an overhead action RPG, like an East style thing, just like fast paced action combat. Right. But it's really just a series of challenges. So each mission is a different map with a different arrangement of traps and enemies that you have to survive. And then you get experience and skill points to level up your character, and you can build weapons and armor in like the screen, in like the castle management part of it. But it's not like an RPG in the traditional sense. You're not like going on an adventure with a connected story. It's just a series of challenges, and then you're leveling up to meet them. It's good. The action's snappy. It's cute pixel art characters. Now, the big mechanical thing about the game is that in this world, money is everything, and that's like they keep beating you over the head with that in the story. Yeah. So the whole point is that as you beat up enemies, you can rotate the right analog stick if you knock them out to give them the shakedown and get more money and get more money out of them. And then once you have your money, you can press a button to bring up a calculator on screen, and every trap or enemy on the screen has a price tag. So you can buy them or bribe them or whatever.
Excellent.
So like there's traps everywhere. So that you might be in a room, and then it's like, okay, the locks go down. It's like you have to clear this room, and there might be like a buzzsaw on the floor. And if you have 300 gold, you can buy the buzzsaw, and then it's your buzzsaw. And so anything you buy gets mapped to a button on the controller. So then the idea is you want to, instead of just engaging the enemies, if you press the attack and dodge button at the same time, you just do a two-handed push that throws enemies back. So you kind of want to position yourself so you do like a 3-hit combo, and that 3-hit combo with the pushback, push them into the buzzsaw, then activate the buzzsaw. then you get bonuses for chaining and killing enemies using the traps that you've purchased. So then after every enemy encounter, it's almost like Devil May Cry style. The enemy encounters are isolated, and once they're over, you get a rating. And then in each stage, there'll be like, 5 enemy encounters, and you get an overall rating at the end of each stage. And that's what dictates how many skill points and stuff you get to develop your character based on your performance. So there's lots of emphasis to replay missions to get better scores once you get more used to the mechanics. Every enemy you buy is a different attack. Yeah. So like you get like they're little slime guys that are called onions, and that's kind of like one of like the first easiest bad guys. Like if you get an onion and you bribe an onion, he just does like a little chomp attack, right? And you get like two of those if you bribe one onion. Yeah. So then the different enemies basically add new attacks to your repertoire for you to end or begin combos with. So it's really cool. It's lots of fun. There's lots of experimenting, because every time you encounter a new enemy, it's also a new move you could potentially do to try in your combos. The system itself keeps track of how many of each enemy you've bribed. So then those also become the materials with which you craft.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is every time you bribe an enemy, it becomes a citizen for your kingdom. Yeah. So when you go to the armor crafting section of the game, it'll say like, oh, to craft this armor, you need to have as citizens 3 skeletons, 2 onions, and 3 lesser dragons. So there's also a collection element where you have to be conscious of that you're hunting those enemies and bribing them to become citizens of your kingdom, so that you can also craft different armors. Every armor has a different special attack. So then, besides modifying your stats, it also expands or modifies your repertoire of moves as well.
Yeah.
So it's really just a kind of a character building action game with a action RPG overhead style of view and gameplay. But it's definitely just all about the action and the combos and orchestrating these kind of trap-based attacks and stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting blend of stuff. So like, I'm getting vibes of all sorts of stuff from what you're describing there. So I'm getting a bit of half-minute hero and a bit of just deception and a bit of, like you say, sort of traditional action RPGs and that kind of thing. That sounds really fun, actually.
Yeah, I'm just liking it because it's not like anything I've played in a long time. It's a really unique game, and I don't get to say that often.
Yeah.
it's so different.
It sounds like a good handheld game as well, a good one to sort of play a mission on your lunch break or something like that.
Yeah, it's perfect for that. It's perfect for that. And cool. that game that's coming out that NIS is bringing out, Princess. What is it? The one where you develop the 4 princesses or whatever.
Oh, Princess Guide, isn't it?
Yeah, it's clearly a sequel to this.
Oh, okay.
Like if you it's clearly the same development team, the same engine, the same pixel art style. It's if you watch footage of Penny Punching Princess and watch footage of Princess Guide, it's clear that this is supposed to be a either a spiritual successor or just a title from the same development team. But there's so much common DNA. Like, so I wasn't initially interested in this Princess Guide, but since I watched footage after playing Penny Punching Princess, now I'm like, okay, sign me up for number 2. Like,
yeah. They released a few games around that period that I'm very interested in all of them, but I haven't got around to picking any of them up yet. So Penny Punching Princess was one. There was that, what's it called, The Longest 5 Minutes as well, that I'd like to try.
Yeah, that's a really cool. Interesting game.
Yeah, so that's the one where you start the final boss, but the main character forgets everything that got him there, so you then go through a series of flashbacks of what happened to bring him to that point, and then sort of the way you play through those flashbacks affects how that final encounter comes out. So yeah, I'm interested to try that one at some point. There was another one as well that I've forgotten what it was. There were I want to say there were like 3 games they released around that same period that all seemed quite experimental and interesting, but
that Birthdays, the Switch version of that Birthdays, that kind of like world building god game.
Yeah. So yeah, some to check out at some point in the near future, hopefully, along with all of the other stuff I need to check out as well.
Yeah, all the video games.
All of the games, yes. All right. Anything else you've been up to?
That's the only thing really substantial. I did hook up the old PS2 to play the original Samurai Warriors for a bit, but you're the Warriors guy right now, so I won't allow. There's not too much I can say about the original Samurai Warriors that hasn't been said everywhere else. It's a good game.
Yeah. So all right, for me then, I've been playing various things for my video series. The things that have been taking up most of my time have been Warriors of Orochi, which I feel like I've got a real sort of bead on what it's all about now. So I'll talk a bit about that for now to begin with. So Warriors of Orochi, I have now finished the Samurai campaign in that, so the first of the campaigns, and I don't know what their intention was with how you're supposed to play through that, but it seems like if you play through one of these campaigns and pay attention to the mechanics, you will then make all of the other ones a bit easier for yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, although each of the campaigns, you basically start with a fresh stock of characters who all start at level 1. By the time you finish one of the campaigns, if you've been paying attention to your character development, you should have a whole bunch of these passive abilities that apply to your whole team, regardless of what characters are in it as well. So, for example, now I've finished the Samurai campaign, I've got the Acclaim ability up to level about 6 or 7, I think, which means that experience gain is considerably increased from what it is normally. So characters in these subsequent campaigns will then level up a lot quicker. I've got buffs to their base defense and life points and so on, so they'll be stronger to begin with, even at level 1. And so yeah, it's been a pleasure to start a new campaign with these fresh characters and have them be not completely useless from the outset. So I'm now working on the Wu campaign, so one of the Three Kingdoms campaigns in that. So in that one you start with Sunsei and Tokugawa and Hanzo Hattori. Because the thing with Warriors of Orochi is that although it splits it up by the various kingdoms, part of the concept of the game is that everyone's got all jumbled up in the first place anyway. So in the Wu campaign there's some samurai characters, there's points in the Wu campaign where certain Wu fighters are fighting other Wu fighters, and it's all designed to sort of mix things up and put characters in matchups that you wouldn't normally be possible in the standard Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors settings. So there's some interesting stuff going on there. There's some really fun characters in Wu. Sunsei is a lot of fun with his tonfa. So he's technically a power character in Warriors Orochi parlance, but he's got quite sort of agile attacks. Ranmaru, who I know you've been having fun with in Samurai Warriors, is a lot of fun. So he's got sort of this long, what's it called, a Nodachi sword? Yeah. So that's got a really wide sweeping arc on it and a lot of fun. I've also discovered that Ranmaru is responsible for making a lot of people very confused because because he is voiced by what's her name, Tara Platt, is it? I just know her as Mitsuru from Persona. But yeah, he is voiced by Tara Platt and looks very much like a pretty girl, but is apparently a boy, so you know, deal with it. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. If you want to see me struggle through the various campaigns and that, I am doing videos on that every Wednesday at the moment, and trying to make my way through all of Warriors Orochi. Because I've never really finished a Warriors game, so I'm going to do my best to actually finish Warriors Orochi eventually, but we'll see how that goes. The other thing I've been playing is, because my cover game is continuing on the Project Zero Fatal Frame series, I am now up to the final installment, which is Maiden of Blackwater on Wii U. Which I know got a fairly mixed reception when it was released, but it's now also one of the sort of rarest and most expensive Wii U games out there, so it's one that a lot of people have become interested in again. And yeah, this is a really cool game. While the sort of two Wii games in this series, which was 4 and the remake of 2, kind of mix things up a bit by making it the over-the-shoulder perspective instead of the fixed camera angles. This one again feels like a bit of a shake-up of how it does things. So it keeps the over-the-shoulder perspective from the previous 2, but because you're using the gamepad as your camera in this one, they've kind of upped the pace of the combat a bit, even more than they had done in Project Zero 4. And so there's several different playable characters. I've got access to 2 of them at the moment. I think there's 3 in total. The first one handles relatively traditionally for the series, in that you sort of point and shoot, and like in the remake of Project Zero 2 for Wii, after each shot you have to wait for your film to reload, and that's one of the things you can upgrade on your camera. Different types of film reload at different speeds as well, so sometimes it's in your interest in using maybe a less powerful form of film that can reload a bit quicker, so you can fire off shots a bit more quickly. They've kind of revamped the way it does how much damage you do, though, because in most of the previous Project Zero games, damage is determined by how long you point at a ghost before you fire off your shot. But in this one, it's to do with how many things you've got in frame at once.
Oh, okay.
And so alongside that, they've introduced a system where when you do damage to a ghost, it sort of makes bits of spirit break off from them and become these sort of discrete things that float around them. And if you don't take a photo of those bits, they will then get reabsorbed back into the ghost, so they'll get some health back. But at the same time, if you take a photograph of the ghost and these bits that are floating around, your shot will be more powerful because there's more things in frame at the time you shoot them. So there's a much greater emphasis on sort of almost composing your shots carefully to do the most damage. Which is, a really interesting way of doing things. And also, alongside that, it makes a sort of more creative use of the camera to solve puzzles and things as well. So previous Project Zero games had things where, like, you come across a locked door and you go, I don't know where the key is for this, and you take a photo of the lock and it would then show you a glimpse of where the key is. In this one, it does the same thing to a certain extent, but again, there's a stronger focus on composition and stuff. So things leave psychic impressions in this, and in order to sort of resolve that psychic impression, you have to point the camera at the thing where this impression is, and also tilt it to the right angle and stuff to make it appear. And so it's not sort of overusing motion controls or anything, but it is making use of the fact that the gamepad has got this really good gyroscopic sensor in it to sort of frame things carefully and so on. There's puzzles that have to be solved by you will get a photograph of something, and you then have to find that location and recreate that photograph as well, which is cool. So sort of you'll see a shot of a locale you might recognize from a particular angle. You then need to go there and take a photograph from that same angle to trigger something happening and so on. So yeah, there's some really cool and creative use of the gamepad in there. It's a game that in its current form could only work on Wii U.
That's cool.
I think.
I like to hear that. I like to hear about a game that's pretty much only playable on the Wii U.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not gimmicky and forced, and it doesn't feel wrong.
No.
It's a natural extension of something you would want in that game based on the game's setting.
Yeah, it works really well. It makes sense. So sort of like the very concept of Project Zero is holding up a camera and looking at things. So sort of holding up the gamepad to do that, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And just the presentation of it is beautiful as well. It's like if anyone sort of thought the Wii U was underpowered, just take a look at this game. It's absolutely beautifully presented. So it's got these gorgeous character models. There's a strong emphasis on sort of getting wet in this as well. So it's sort of how wet you are, how much you've been covered in rain and water and stuff is actually a game mechanic. So sort of the more wet you are, the more likely you are to attract ghosts to yourself, and sort of that's reflected through the graphics and stuff as well. So you can actually see sort of characters' clothes clinging to them when they've been out in the rain for a long time and that sort of thing. And that's not just for show, it's actually a sort of visual depiction of how vulnerable you are. The sound is really good as well. I mean, that's been a running pattern for the series as a whole, but the sound in this is wonderful. It really nails the feeling of loneliness as well, which I think is sort of a core theme of it, which is kind of interesting because it's the Project Zero game that has got the most speaking characters in it that I've seen. So there's most of the Project Zero games, there might be some sort of initial cutscenes where you're talking to people, but then for the rest of the game you might only speak to one or two people for the entire duration, and the rest of it you're by yourself. In this one there's a lot more scenes where people are actually interacting with each other and doing things together, but I think for me it's probably nailed this sort of emotional feeling of loneliness better than anything else, and a lot of that is to do with the sound.
Sure.
So I mean, this is something that will obviously vary for different people, but sort of I associate the feeling of loneliness with a room that is completely silent, but aside from like the ticking of a clock or something like that. And one of the areas that you revisit most frequently in this game is this shop where one of the main characters and her sort of mentor, or her guardian, live. And early on in the game, her guardian disappears. So, like a big part of the story is discovering what happened to her and whether she's still alive and that sort of thing. And anytime you go back to this shop and you're by yourself, it's completely silent. But the main room, because it's an antique shop that's been converted into a cafe, there's these clocks all over the place. So depending on where you stand, you'll hear these different ticking noises. So there's like a big grandfather clock that does this sort of big pendulum sounds. There's sort of smaller clocks in different places that will make different ticking sounds, and it just sort of really gets to you after a while. It's not in like a bad or an annoying way or anything, but it just really drives home that feeling of, yeah, this character's by themselves now and they're going to have to do things for themselves. So yeah, I've been very impressed with that so far. I'm probably about a third of the way through it at the time of recording, so hopefully I'll be able to write something about it by the end of next week, and then that will be the entire Project Zero series done, which it's taken 2 months for me to get through the whole lot, but I'm very glad I have, because it's been a real experience. So check them out if you want some good horror, basically. And that's pretty much all I've been up to lately, apart from the stuff that is appearing regularly on my video channel. I've kind of taken a break from Auto Modelista for the Sunday driving series now, because I kind of hit a wall in terms of progression, and I'm not sure how to get past that. So by the time you listen to this, I will have started a new series on there of arcade races, and I think I'm going to do Outrun 2 Coast to Coast on that for a few weeks.
Oh, fun.
which is a game that I absolutely love. So I'm looking forward to spending some more time with that. And then my New Game Plus series on Fridays. I'm playing through the original Project Zero's post game. At the time of recording, I've just finished the main mission mode in that, and I'm going to do another run through the main story of that on the Nightmare difficulty with like the fully upgraded camera and stuff that you can carry across onto that. So watch out for that on Fridays. All right, so that's pretty much everything I've been up to for the minute. So let's take a short break, and then we'll get into our main topic for today, which is light gun shooters. So we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. For our main topic today, we decided we wanted to talk about light gun games. I don't think there was a particular trigger for wanting to talk about light gun games. It's just something we both like.
I was excited to play them. I was excited to try them on my big TV because I got a new TV, and I was like, I can't wait to play light gun shooters on this thing because the people are going to be like the size of actual people.
I mean, light gun games are an interesting thing to talk about anyway, because they are actually one of the oldest types of, I almost don't want to say video game, because they kind of predate video games to a certain extent. So
sure, shooting galleries.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did a bit of research into this back when I covered Galgun Double Piece in 2016, so I got a fairly extensive article on the history of this sort of thing, but sort of the key points are that they've been around since about sort of the 1930s or so, which they were sort of electromechanical things then, but they still used what we'd call a light gun. So they were a gun-shaped thing that would, in that case, fire out a beam of light, and then there would be sensors that would detect when that beam of light was hitting them, but they would be actual physical objects at that time. So sort of between about the sort of 1930s and 1960s, both Sega and Nintendo were very much competing for sort of who could do the best, coolest, most physical things at the time. So there's things like Sega had a really cool periscope game where you look through a submarine's periscope and you're firing at ships using light gun technology, and so on. So they then came home in the 70s with the original Magnavox Odyssey, so not the Magnavox Odyssey 2, which I've been writing about recently, but the predecessor to that, which was one of the first commercially available home consoles. That had an optional rifle that came with it, and that came with, I think, 4 games. And because the Magnavox Odyssey 1 was such a primitive device, it could display 3 dots and 1 vertical line on screen at once. So most of its games were based around putting overlays on your television, and then wherever the dots appeared and the line appeared, that would sort of make things light up in these overlays and so on, and you then shoot those. And the way light guns worked at the time, they kind of went the opposite route from how those initial electromechanical games worked. So rather than the gun firing out a beam of light and the sensor being on the thing you were shooting at, it was then the other way round by this point. So the gun had the sensor in it, and when you pulled the trigger on the gun, it would trigger like a flash of light or blanking out the screen on the television, and that would then allow the gun to know where it was pointed, basically. Now, this is the way this worked is the main reason that earlier light gun games don't work on modern televisions, because part of this technology was based on the way that older televisions, old CRTs, produced their image, sort of a dot at a time, a line at a time on the screen. And modern televisions don't work in that way. So that means that even up until sort of PS1, PS2 era, with things like Namco's GunCon device, they don't work on a modern television just because it doesn't know where you're pointing at the screen. And so we kind of the genre kind of died out for a little bit until we had some alternative solutions in place. So arcade games realised that we could use IR sensors instead, and then when we got the Wii in the home, that was using IR sensors, and so devices like the Wii Remote and the optional zapper attachment for that then meant that we could bring that back in there, and that's what I sort of think as the second era of light gun games. And then we mentioned a little bit earlier that virtual reality's use of motion controls and physically aiming things, and the fact it can detect where you are in 3D space, that's kind of brought about another resurgence of the genre. So it's something that's kind of ebbed and flowed as technology has changed over the years, but it's something that people have always found quite appealing, I think. So there's your brief sort of potted history lesson of that. So so I mean, what was your earliest experience with a light gun game, do you reckon? Was it Duck Hunt, or was it something else?
You know, I think I would even trace it back to like physical toys I had as a kid.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't a light gun, but like I used to have this thing where it was like a big plastic box with a plastic screen on it, and it had BBs in it.
Right.
And the BBs would fall down an incline to the front, and it would basically, there was a screen there, a clear plastic screen, and then you had a gun, and the gun had a magnet on the tip of it.
Okay.
And so you would touch the tip of the gun to one of the BBs, and then drag them up the screen, and then there was targets in the back of this, and targets in the back of this box, and you'd pull the trigger on the gun, and it would do something with the magnet, and it would fling the BB.
Right.
From the magnet. And like that was one of my kind of earliest experiences with a shooting gallery kind of play experience. So like I've always, ever since I was a kid, like that was really formative to me. Like I would sit with that thing for hours, and it was stupid, right? There was like 4 little targets, but like it was just so fascinating to me. And so then I think from there would definitely be Duck Hunt. And and I was actually the weird kid because I liked the clay shooting more than Duck Hunt.
Yeah.
Like the clay shooting mini game, I always really preferred to Duck Hunt as a kid on the Nintendo. But just aside from that, like I used to just love it in the arcades.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, to me, like of course light gun games have been successful in the home, but like most of my notes I have for things to talk about today are kind of related to the arcade and how and our light gun games that were specifically like arcade specific experiences that like never quite were able to translate well to the home. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what my earliest experience would have been, because I played Duck Hunt for the first time quite late.
Okay.
But I was definitely familiar with Duck Hunt, and one of the things I recall with Duck Hunt in particular was my earliest experience with it weren't all that positive, because I couldn't really get my head around aiming. Like I didn't know how you could aim accurately, and so like the first few times I played Duck Hunt, I remember really struggling with it and it just not being able to hit anything. Until I eventually sort of adopted an almost like sniper-like posture with the zapper, in that I was holding it right up against my eye and looking down it and pointing at things that way. And I had way more success doing it that way than actually just sort of pointing the thing at the screen. So I don't know if that was sort of an accepted way to play Duck Hunt at the time, but that's certainly what I sort of associate with that. But I was familiar with light gun games quite early on. So like the old Atari systems, the sort of last model of the Atari 8-bit, which was the Atari XE game system, the XEGS. This came out after the 16-bit Atari ST came out, but it was sort of Atari's last-ditch attempt to do something with the 8-bit range and kind of follow the success of the 2600. It failed because Atari of that era were complete idiots, but yeah, it was a bold attempt, and it's something that collectors very much like these days. So the XEGS was basically a 65XE. So it was Atari's last model of 8-bit computer, modelled kind of in the same way as the ST with the grey plastic and the sort of vented top. So it was a nice looking thing, but it was primarily designed as a games console rather than a computer. And so it had a detachable keyboard, so you could use it just as a standalone games console if you wanted it. It just had a unit with a cartridge slot and action buttons, and you could just plug any old controller into it. But one of the things that came with was a light gun, and I think that was one of the times that I was most familiar with it. We never had an XEGS ourselves, but I was familiar with the fact that light guns existed, and there were sort of type-in listings from magazines and things that kind of taught you how to tell the computer to read information from that light gun, how to pull in that information about where it was pointing, whether you were pulling the trigger and that sort of thing. So that's sort of my earliest memory of it, is sort of having a very vague understanding of the technology behind it and how the computer would communicate with it, but never actually having one. The first light gun I would have had for myself was the GunCon for the PlayStation, which me and my friends, we kind of all got around the same time. It was about the time, I think, Time Crisis released.
Okay, sure.
And so Time Crisis was a game that was very popular among me and my group of friends for a little while. Time Crisis was... Yeah, so it was Namco, wasn't it, I think?
Yes.
GunCon
as a whole was just like Namco's baby.
Yes. Time Crisis was one of those games that I kind of had a bit of a tough time kind of understanding at the time in terms of whether it was worth the money, because it was very much an arcade game in terms of design and structure, in that you could play through the whole thing in about 20 minutes. And this was also a period when arcade ports didn't come with a lot of extra content, as they tend to do these days. And so you bought a copy of Time Crisis and the GunCon for PS1, and you basically had a 20-minute game. But it was a very replayable and enjoyable 20-minute game, but it was still a 20-minute game. And that was something that I kind of wasn't sure how to feel about at the time, but I enjoyed the experience of it, and I enjoyed the physicality of using the GunCon. We also had a lot of fun when we discovered that if you switch the in-game language to German, it changes all the speech into German as well. So, Time Crisis in German is an infinitely superior experience to the English version. So I highly recommend it.
That sounds very entertaining.
Aufladen!
I've just had a flashback of major proportions regarding early light gun experiences. Did you guys have the Action Max in the UK?
I know the name, but I can't think what it is, so I'm not sure we actually had it, or if I'm just familiar with it.
So the Action Max was like this weird, kind of half-hearted kind of console that hooked up to your VCR. So it was...
Oh, no, yes, I do remember that.
It was VHS tapes, and you had this little console, and it was just exclusively light gun games. It was a light gun console, like the end.
Yes.
And you had to hook up this terrible, giant, like, flashing red light to your television.
Oh, God, yes, I remember this.
And so it was just light gun games, and it was the same every time. Like, there was no, you know...
Well, you were playing a videotape, weren't you?
Because you were playing a VHS. And I just remember I had a friend who had it, and he had the Rescue of Pops Ghostly, and which was like puppets, and you were like blasting these like puppet ghosts in like a haunted mansion, and that freaking Action Max, man.
Well, this would have been a similar time to arcade games that were doing a similar kind of thing, but with Laserdisc.
Yeah.
So if you think of like Mad Dog McCree was probably the most well-known of them. Yeah. Mad Dog McCree is not a game I ever actually saw in the wild, I don't think, but I remember vividly seeing it on the Games Master television show, which was like our big gaming TV show in sort of the early to mid-90s. And that's a big sort of thing that Digitiser that I mentioned earlier was sort of trying to tap into at the same time. So Games Master had sort of specific gaming challenges, so they'd get kids in and they'd do it like a game show, so people would compete to get the best score on something. And one of the early episodes I really remember seeing was people playing Mad Dog McCree. And like being initially hit with the fact that, wow, this is so amazing, it looks real because it's video. And then it's sort of taking the time to step back and analyze it and think, oh, it's not really that good.
No, it's really not that good.
Yeah. This is a slight tangent, but I'll say it anyway. That thing you mentioned there was also a related thing called Video Driver.
Oh.
I don't know if you had that in the States, but it was a very similar idea. So, but instead of light gun games, it was a driving game that you played on VHS.
Oh. How would that even work?
Well, I'm glad you asked. You had to hook up this enormous, weird plastic frame to your TV. And part of this plastic frame, there is a platform across the bottom. And on this platform on the bottom, you put a toy car. And the toy car had some sort of light sensor in it. And it was also motorized, so you had to plug it in. And you had a little steering wheel controller console with a gear shift and stuff like that. And steering on the console there would move this toy car from side to side.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And so you'd play the video, and you were supposed to sort of move this car to somewhere where it wasn't bumping into things on the screen, and so like you'd lose points that appeared on the mechanical mile counter on the console if you crashed into something. But because it was just running off a VHS cassette and it had no sort of means of actually sort of processing whether you were actually colliding with something or not, and it was just doing this through a light sensor, it was absolute garbage to play. But the technology was so cool because it was just all these cool bits of plastic that you hooked onto your TV. And but yeah, I mean, like the sort of video-based shooting games, it was not good to play, but it was quite an experience. It just
Sega made this.
I think it was published by Action GT over here. I don't remember seeing the Sega name on it anywhere. But
I'm looking at a box with a Sega logo on it.
Oh wow! Yeah, definitely published by Action GT over here. But yeah, so evidently Sega got involved with it in the North American release, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Tyco, which was a toy manufacturer in the U.S. at least, it was Tyco, which is a toy manufacturer, and then Sega.
Yeah.
But maybe they just put their name on it or got involved in it. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. No, I just remember it being terrible but cool. It was like one of those things that was sort of always in the Christmas catalogs and so on, and like everyone wanted one, and then when they got it, they realised that computer games are better.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So back to sort of GunCon era. So Time Crisis was cool, but I think probably the light gun I played the most in this period would have been Point Blank.
As God intended.
Oh, Point Blank is such a good game.
Yeah.
And it really bums me out that there's no really good way to play it now on modern televisions. So, like, if I want to play Point Blank now, I would need to use the only CRT I've got in my house now, which is very small, which is actually the TV I used to play it on when I played it a whole bunch. But somehow it just doesn't seem quite as satisfying now.
Right.
But yeah, Point Blank, if you're unfamiliar, that was another Namco game. It was an arcade game again, but it was set up in such a way that it was a lot more substantial than Time Crisis was. So it was a bunch of mini games, wasn't it, basically? In that you'd play one or two players, and it would set you specific objectives, and then it would give you quite a tight time limit to accomplish that objective by shooting things on the screen. And it wasn't just action-based things; there were like puzzles and stuff in there as well. And if I remember correctly, it would sort of randomize which stages you got each time you played. So you'd have a slightly different experience each time. You could play it single player, you could play it with two people. The PlayStation version had like party modes and stuff as well. And yeah, I just remember spending a lot of time playing that game on PlayStation when I first moved to university. It was a good sort of ice-breaking game. Mm-hmm. Because light gun games are so sort of fundamentally understandable to even people who've never picked up a controller before. It was a game that people would often come into my room and we'd play, and I got to know a lot of my flatmates in my first year at university by playing Point Blank with them. So yeah, very fond memories of that one indeed.
Did you play the DS version?
I didn't know. Is that any good?
I didn't play it either. I was just curious if you had.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's one of those things that. I mean, the actual sort of fundamental gameplay doesn't necessarily need the gun, but I think part of the appeal is just that physical fact of pointing something at the screen.
Oh, absolutely. That
kind of thing. I have quite fond memories of that. I have slightly less fond memories of my Player 2 gun, because I did get two guns eventually. But my second one, because gun cons were relatively expensive because they were sort of officially licensed products, my Player 2 gun, I got a sort of third-party one. That was designed to look like a real gun. Yeah, so it had sort of like this sort of fake wood handle and stuff, and it looked like a sort of pistol. it had what it called force feedback, which actually meant it did this slightly dull vibrating every time you pulled the trigger, regardless of whether the game was making use of like DualShock or anything like that. It was just literally you pulled the trigger and it would turn on a motor in the gun, and that was force feedback. It was also very inaccurate, so we used to fight over who got to be player 2, and as all good people should. But yeah. So
I had the Cadillac of third-party guns, and if you are not familiar with the Innovation Jolt gun, this is what I had. The Innovation Jolt gun was designed to be as close to arcade Time Crisis gun as possible.
Oh, okay.
So you actually plugged it in just like a regular gun con, and then you had to plug it into power. It had a power adapter, and it actually had the shell ejecting. Like the thing would actually shoot back on a motor, just like just like GunCon in the arcade, and it had the pedal.
Oh wow, that's awesome!
So it was like proper arcade Time Crisis, and that was what I had for the PS1 for GunCon. I never had an official one until the PS2, but that was a GunCon. It worked as a GunCon, but it actually had that shell ejecting the shell from the chamber, like slide back action. I'm not a gun guy. I don't know what the exact name for that is, but it was sweet as hell. And if like you like walked in while I was using it, it was just like the click, click, click. It was awesome. But it also had wires out the wazoos, right? It's like there was the controller wire into the system, a power cord, so you had to be close to an outlet, and then the cable for the pedal. So I'm like standing there and it's like massive cables.
Well, the GunCon as well, didn't you had to plug it into the video output on the PlayStation as well, didn't you?
Yes,
if I remember correctly. So there was that as well. So yeah, that would have been a real mess. But yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, so I didn't play many light gun games when we get forward into the PS2 era. I had a friend who had the I think it was the second GunCon, wasn't it? The blue USB one.
Mm-hmm.
So I played that a bit, but at that period I kind of fell off the light gun thing a bit, because it was at an era where I wrote about this the other day when I was writing about Ghost Squad, which, believe me, we will be talking about in a moment. But yeah, one of the things is that as sort of home consumers got a bit more comfortable with the idea of computer and console games being more substantial experiences than just arcade games, a lot of people kind of developed that expectation. And I know I certainly remember in the early 2000s in particular not wanting to buy games that were arcade ports, because I thought that I wanted quote better from my console games, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So
more substantial experiences.
Yeah, I wanted these more substantial experiences, and I kind of didn't value these arcade experiences as much. So I never bought myself a GunCon 2 for PlayStation 2. So I didn't really play a lot of that era of light gun games. But I know in our sort of planning for this, you've mentioned a few. So
yeah, I love PS2 GunCon games.
Yeah. So what are some highlights?
Well, what was nice about the PS2 GunCon era is that Sega and Namco got buddy-buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So they made some games together that were really cool. Most specifically, I'm talking Vampire Knight.
Okay.
Which, if you're a Castlevania geek like me, is a lot of fun, because it's basically just House of the Dead with vampires instead of zombies. So, like, different vampires are coming at you, and you can blast their heads off, and it's a good time, because it has that spooky gothic kind of Japanese gothic setting, which is really, really cool. I mean, most of these games aren't really anything special mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
They're just cool, They're just GunCon games in different settings. So like, specifically, like I have and love Vampire Knight. I also have Ninja Assault, which is the same thing. It's just so like you're a ninja and your gun shoots the little shurikens out, and you're fighting like ninjas and samurais and stuff in like big Japanese palaces and stuff, which is really cool. Yeah, it was just fun. There was also one by Capcom that was set in the Dino Crisis universe.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember the name of it for the life of me.
Didn't they? They did at least one Resident Evil one around that period as well, didn't they? Or was
yes,
that
they
PS1
did.
era?
Yeah, they did.
Resident Evil Gun Survivor, wasn't it, or something? Or Dead Aim, I think it was called in some places.
Yeah, and I think that series was then continued on the Wii.
Yes, they did. They did the Resident Evil Chronicles games, which I haven't played yet, but I did pick up a few weeks back, so I will be having a look at those at some point. Yeah.
So there was lots of cool stuff. Dino Survivor?
Oh, yes, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so there was a pack you could... Oh, no, it was Dino Survivor in Japan because it was a spin-off of Resident Evil Survivor.
Right.
In the US, it was Dino Stalker. I don't know if you guys got it or not in your...
I definitely recognise the name Dino Survivor, so I'm not sure if that came here or not, but I'm familiar with it, definitely.
Yeah, so that's cool. Yeah, like I said, I love these games.
Yeah, so that's the sort of era of it that I kind of missed out on a bit. I kind of missed out on it in the immediately preceding Dreamcast era as well, because again, I know House of the Dead on Dreamcast is sort of very well regarded and that sort of thing, but I didn't play that. I think the only sort of real... I don't know, Dreamcast was kind of an interesting period because a lot of its best games very much were arcade games. So if you think of stuff like Crazy Taxi and that kind of thing, but I just kind of had this hesitation at buying anything that required an accessory.
Yeah. Well,
apart from Sega Bass Fishing for some reason, which I really enjoyed.
It was weird in the West anyway, because for some reason with like school shootings and all that shit, like Sega decided that they weren't going to release the first party gun in the West. Okay. So like you had to buy a third party gun to even play the Dreamcast Lightgun games. Right. And there wasn't really much. It was just like I can't think of any besides House of the Dead and a Death Crimson OX. I can't think of any other light gun games for the Dreamcast besides those two. I'm sure they exist. I just can't think of them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess after that we get into our sort of new era of light gun games, which is the Wii. Yeah. And so obviously the Wii was released in this sort of transitional period between SD and HD. And so its new way of doing things was something that would work on either standard definition televisions and HD televisions, which kind of opened things up to people who might not have revisited this idea for a while. So sort of one of the key characteristics of the Wii Remote is its pointer functionality. So you can point at the screen, it can accurately sort of show where you are, and it doesn't have quite the same feel as a light gun, but it's a similar feeling, but it's not the same. It doesn't have quite the same physicality about it. I don't know what's really different about it, because you're effectively doing the same thing, but it
does feel different though.
Yeah, I haven't. Have you ever tried using the Wii Zapper?
Yeah, I have one. I like it.
I mean, I'd like to pick up one of those because I've got a couple of games that support it, like Link's crossbow training and stuff. So I would like to pick one up at some point. And I can imagine that would help to a certain degree with this feeling. I think it's just the fact that it's just the shape, I think. It just doesn't feel like you've got a gun in your hand. It just feels like you've got a TV remote with a trigger, which is what it is, basically.
Yeah, no, I've never played Ghost Squad without the Zapper. I don't even know.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, Have you ever played with the GunCon 3 on the PS3?
No, actually.
Yeah, see, that's like a tragedy story, because I think only Time Crisis 4 works with it, because there was no other GunCon game that worked with it. Because when Time Crisis 4 came out, I bought it because I was sad for the PS3. I was like, oh, light gun games are dead now. Yeah. And then when Time Crisis 4 came out, I lost my mind, because gun games are back, and that has IR sensors. Right. So you just put the IR sensors on top of your TV, and then it's USB into the PS3. But that feels different too. Yeah. Because it's just IR. Like it feels in the same way the Wii does. There's a slight disconnect. But I can't think of any other games that used it. I know I certainly don't have any. So it really petered off on the PS3. Light gun was pretty much exclusively a Wii thing now at that point.
Yeah. You know, I think it might be something just as simple as the fact that anything using IR doesn't have the flash that the old ones did. I think it might just be something as simple as that. So like the older Lightgun games, it's just so associated with the fact you pull the trigger, you'll get a flash on the screen, and that was part of the feedback of it, I think.
Yeah.
So on like even as far back as the Wii Zapper, you pulled the trigger and it had that satisfying sort of sprung click on it. But you'd also have the flash on the screen. You'd have the sound effects, and it was all part of the overall experience. And like Wii shooters and presumably the GunCon 3 stuff would have lacked that because it didn't need it anymore. So I think that might be something that people designing more recent games might not have thought of as being a key part of the experience for some people. But yeah, I think that may well be part of it. But anyway, Ghost Squad. Oh my! So I picked up Ghost Squad just the other day because I just happened to wander into CEX, so our national chain of sort of secondhand game shops. And I thought, I fancy a few Wii games, so I picked up a couple of things. I picked up, there's a Harvest Moon game for Wii that I picked up that I haven't tried yet. And I picked up Ghost Squad, because I thought, I've seen this around, but I've never actually tried it. It's by Sega. It looks like it might be a bit of fun, and it was like £1 or something like that. So I thought I'll give it a go. I popped it in my Wii, and I was like, oh my god, this is like a proper old school light gun shooter. Like it feels like sort of Time Crisis in terms of execution and stuff.
It's meant to be as the successor to Virtua Cop.
Yes, and it very much feels that way as well. So Ghost Squad, if you're unfamiliar, is a game where you play part of a special forces team. The plot doesn't matter at all. There's just a whole bunch of bad guys between you and a super bad guy.
I was going to say one bad guy matters.
Yeah. So you just blast your way through these hordes of enemies until you get to the boss at the end, who you generally have to kill in a slightly unusual way in some cases. So like the first boss, he's in a helicopter, so you have to shoot him down with a missile launcher. The second one you've got to get with a headshot with just one shot, and I can't remember what you have to do with the last one, but he's like on a boat or something, I think. But the thing with Ghost Squad is that although at its core it is very much like a very traditional light gun shooter with just sort of blast your way through everything, it's got a whole bunch of interesting little mechanics that it brings up around the place. So one of its key USPs is the fact that you have branching pathways through the levels. And so every so often you'll get given they call it a tactical decision. And so like you might have the choice to either go and prioritize rescuing hostages or break into a room and just try and defeat all the enemies. And depending on the choices you make along the way, you'll have a different route through that level, or different objectives to complete. And the game makes use of an action button as well as the fire button. So sometimes when you're rescuing hostages, you have to press the action button to handcuff them rather than shooting them. And so it just gives you an extra thing to think about and makes things a bit more interesting. But then that also has some extra modes along the way as well. So the Wii version has this party mode where you can play with up to 4 people, and one of the variations on that is ninja mode, which means that it plays like Ninja Assault. So you're throwing shuriken instead of shooting things, and they actually bother to update the in-game models so the characters look like ninjas. They replace all the physics objects in the levels with Japanese-inspired things. So like instead of like a bowl of fruit on the table that will go flying if you shoot it, it's a Japanese doll that will sort of explode in a weird pose with fans when you shoot it instead, and it's just delightful.
There's a strong meta game, and that's why I always like Ghost Squad, because there's other guns to unlock that change the way the game plays, and level up too. Don't they level up? Or
so there's like a progression system in this, and this was actually in the original arcade version. I was surprised to discover it was one of those games that used sort of those reusable cards that you could plug in.
Oh, okay.
Apparently that particular mechanic didn't make it to most of the North American releases of the game, but in Japan it was one where you were supposed to buy one of these rewritable cards, and that would be good for up to 100 games. And you'd plug the card in, and you would record your name and your profile on it, and you'd be able to level up. And leveling up would unlock new weapons for you to use. It would unlock new outfits for your character to appear in the cutscenes. You get a new title as well. So like you'd have a sort of military rank, and that would appear on the high score table and so on. So like if you played the game a bunch, you'd be like a colonel or something like that. And if you got a high score, you'd be like Colonel Pete on the high score table. But yeah, obviously that made perfect sense to transfer over into the home version as well. So you have all these unlockables and this meta game of getting new weapons and new new costumes for your character. And so, yeah, there's plenty of replay value there. So between the different routes through the game, and actually the better you do at the game and the more you play it, the more of these different routes you have available as well. So I think there's something ridiculous like 16 different difficulty levels for it. And so every time you beat a level and successfully beat the final boss for that level, because you can clear the level without killing the final boss, and that counts as clearing the level but not succeeding it. So every time you actually pull off the last thing you need to do, defeating the final boss in a time limit usually, the mission level will go up by 1, and the higher the mission level is, the more choices you have to make over the course of the level.
Okay.
And so you have more different routes you can take, and that obviously provides you with potential to score more points because you can make the level last longer if you want to. And that kind of thing. So yeah, there's like a really, really surprisingly deep meta game to the experience as well. But at its core, it is pointing at the screen and shooting bad guys until they fall over.
Sure. Yeah, Ghost Squad just always was one of the games where, like, when I had to take a defensive stance and stand up for light gun games, I was always like, here's one that's actually worth your money. Because lots of people, it was always, I'm hesitant to buy it. It's an arcade experience. It's a half hour, and there's no, it doesn't change. There's nothing to develop. If you're not a score hunter player, there's very little to a light gun game. But Time Crisis, Ghost Squad was one of those games where I could always say to people, well, here's a game with different playthroughs, things to unlock, things to grind out. Like, so here was an example of a light gun game that did home version very, very well.
Yeah. I think an interesting development is the fact that people have come a lot more around to this idea of traditional arcade games again now. I think people are a lot more familiar with score attack and that sort of thing.
Because we're all grumpy adults. A game that takes a half hour to play through is...
Yes. I mean, there's that. I think the internet has helped as well. So sort of like the fact that there's been a fair few internet games that have a strong emphasis on score attack and leaderboards and beating your friends and that sort of thing. I think that's helped as well.
Sure.
So like when I think back to sort of my big sort of conversion back to appreciating arcade style games again was probably Geometry Wars on Xbox. Just because that plays such a strong focus on its leaderboards. I mean, Geometry Wars 2, literally the mode selection screen had the leaderboards right there, ready for you. And so I think that element of competition has really helped people to be a bit more accepting of this structure of game again. So, and we're starting to see a lot more of those appearing again. So we're starting to see shoot 'em ups getting retail releases and that sort of thing. So we had Raiden 5 a while back, for example. We haven't really seen many light gun games get big releases. I mean, the most we've seen is sort of some of these VR games getting retail releases. But I think sort of we're on track to maybe see it a bit more accepted again in the near future, just because people are a bit more familiar with that sort of game. But yeah, Ghost Squad was cool. Another Wii one that I wanted to bring up was actually Wii Play Motion, which was another one of these games that I picked up the other day for like £1 from CEX. And it's easy to dismiss Wii Play Motion as just another collection of mini games because it's part of Nintendo's Wii series. That was sort of their thing. But Wii Play Motion was a game that actually has a really interesting story behind it because it came out a little bit after Nintendo developed the Wii Remote Plus, which was the Wii Remote that had the Motion Plus accessory built into it. And the Motion Plus accessory was the thing that allowed the Wii Remote to much more accurately sense 6 degrees of movement. So rather than just relying purely on the IR sensor, it had much better sort of gyroscopic sensing capabilities, and so that then informed the development of how good the Wii U gamepad is at sensing motion and that sort of thing. But Wii Play Motion was developed as almost as a competition between a bunch of different developers. So Nintendo got a bunch of people together and said, right, we've got this new tech and we want to show people how cool it is. And so you go away and develop some prototypes and we'll flesh out the best ones into a game and collect them all together and call it Wii Play Motion. And so the project involved... sorry, I'm just going to have to refer back to my list of this because I wrote about it the other day. Because it's like a really all-star list of people who got involved with it. So there was Yuji Naka's post-Sonic studio, which is Prope.
Oh, jeez, yeah. Okay, if Prope's involved on there, you don't even have to list anymore.
Yeah, so Prope were involved. There was Chunsoft. It was
wow.
Good Feel, who I always forget what they made, but it was something quite well known. There was Arzest, which was the company that was set up by a bunch of former Sega employees, including Naoto Oshima, who was the original character designer of Sonic the Hedgehog. Good Feel made Wario Land Shake It, Kirby's Epic Yarn, and a bunch of Street Pass games, and they're currently working on Yoshi's Crafted World, so they've done a lot with Nintendo. There is Skip, who was set up by a guy who used to work for Square, so they're mostly well known for the Bit Generations and art style games, but they also made
wonderful.
Yeah, they also made Chibi Robo, so that's probably their most well known one. Prope, we've already mentioned. There was Mitchell Corporation, who made Pang and Polarium. Actually, we talked about on the DS episode a while back.
Oh, I love Polarium.
Yeah, and Vanpool, who made Tinkle's Rosy Rupee Land and the Dylan's Rolling Western games. So, like the talent who got involved in this like throwaway collection of mini games is astonishing, really. But the main reason I wanted to bring it up is Prope's game as part of this, which was called Trigger Twist. And the concept for Trigger Twist was that Yuji Naka and friends decided that they wanted to make a light gun shooter that extended outside of your TV. And so the original concept was as a horror game. They wanted a game where you were climbing up a sort of spooky old town shooting ghosts. They eventually had to change that because one of the other teams was also making on a ghost themed game, and they didn't want to do two of them. And so the other ghost themed game was made by I think it was Arzest. Yeah, Arzest made a game where you point the Wii remote around and use the sound in the speaker to locate ghosts. And so Prope decided to do something a bit different. So they took this same idea of making a light gun shooter that didn't require you to point the gun at the TV, and they made three stages, so three distinct stages. So the first one was clearly inspired by Duck Hunt. So you're out in a field, and initially you're just shooting targets, and then and then you're shooting balloons, and then you're shooting UFOs, and you're preventing Miis from getting abducted by them. But the really clever thing is, it doesn't use the pointer functionality at all. So rather than using the IR sensor, it just uses the Wii Motion Plus's gyroscope, and so it knows which direction you're pointing. So it knows when you're pointing at the screen, and it can accurately sort of reflect where you're pointing on the screen if you're pointing at actually in the direction of your television. But the cool thing is, if you point the remote off to your side or over your shoulder, that will then rotate the camera angle on the TV so that you're looking to your side or behind you, and you've still got a crosshair on screen. You can still move the controller around, pointing in a completely different direction, and still aim and hit things accurately. So the concept of this game was that things would come from all directions, so you get a little notification, a little arrow on the screen that's saying, oh, there's something over on your left. So you have to point the remote off to your left, but while you're still
That's
looking
straight
at
up
the TV.
Panzer Dragoon, so it doesn't surprise me that Yuji Naka thought of this.
Yeah, but it works brilliantly well. And it's like, I've never seen this done before, but it works absolutely perfectly. Even if you like invert the remote and point it over your shoulder to shoot something behind you, it is still completely and utterly accurate. So like you can accurately shoot things that are quite behind you, so sort of behind where you're sitting, and it still works brilliantly. And yeah, I was just really surprised that this concept was never sort of really fleshed out and done a bit more with. So I know we had various things that used a vaguely similar idea to do first-person shooter mechanics on the Wii, but that tended to be a case of rather than using the Wii Remote Plus, it would be a case of you'd move the pointer towards the side of the screen and it would pan in that direction. So that was quite a common use of it. I think the Metroid games did that, and there were various others that did that kind of thing. But this idea of actually pointing the remote in a particular direction and it actually swinging the camera angle around is not something I'd seen before. But once you get used to the idea of pointing the device in one direction and remaining sort of keeping your eyes fixed on the TV, it becomes really, really natural. And I was so impressed with that game. So yeah, Wii Remote, we play, what's it called? We Play Motion. Definitely well worth a look. It's like this was one of those collections that I sort of written off because like, oh, you know, Wii
sure.
game collection and that sort of thing. But just like the sheer talent involved in this game and how well fleshed out all these ideas were is just well worth taking a look at. It was a real experiment for Nintendo at the time. It was Iwata he said at the time, this is not something Nintendo's ever done before, and I don't think anyone has ever developed a game like this before. But the final result was just excellent.
I'm sure it can be gotten for a song at this point.
Yeah, like I say, I got my copy for like £2. So, obviously, you need a Wii Remote Plus or a Wii Remote with a Motion Plus in it at the time, which is probably the main reason why this sort of control scheme was not more widespread or more widely adopted. Because ideally, you don't want to make people rely on an external accessory. But I mean, the Wii U. Its default controller was the Wii Remote Plus.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just surprising it wasn't explored a bit more because it works really well. So that's one that really struck me recently and is really fresh in my mind. So
very cool. I'll definitely have to give that a try.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. So. Like I say, my only real other sort of experience with Lightgun games recently has been in VR.
Yeah, and so, that seems like the next natural step of where it would have to go.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and so like using stuff like the Move controllers and such. The most natural use for those is still shooting at things. I know you can sort of make arguments about, oh, we should be better than that by now, but no, it's still fun and it's still satisfying. And there's some good games that leverage that control scheme. So I'm just trying to remember what they were called because I can never remember the name of one of them.
Wasn't that Blue Reflection, or what was that game?
No, not Blue Reflection. Blue Estate.
Blue Estate. That's it.
Yes, I did want to mention Blue Estate because that is technically not a light gun shooter, so that doesn't support Move or anything like that.
Oh.
That is a PS4 game that actually came out quite early in the PS4's life. It's a digital download only game.
Why did I think that was VR? There are some VR gun games though.
Yes, there are. They might have actually done a VR version of Blue Estate. I want to say that is a thing that exists, but without looking it up, I'm not sure. Blue Estate, actually, thank you for reminding me of that because that's a really cool one. That one actually uses the DualShock 4's motion controller.
Oh, okay.
And so you sort of point the DualShock 4 vaguely at the screen, and you tilt it around to move an aim sight on the screen. It's not perfect. The fact it has a dedicated recenter your sights button on it sort of is testament to how not perfect it is.
Sure.
But it is a good balance between sort of just moving a cursor around on the screen and actually having that physicality aspect in there. Plus, it's a really cool game as well because it's got a really nice blend of humor and drama to it. So it's sort of like I guess you'd call it a sort of comedy crime drama. It's very similar in tone to the House of the Dead Overkill.
Oh, okay.
And so there's lots of foul language and swearing and silly scenes in it. But it's just got these really cool set pieces where you're fighting a variety of different enemies. There's some really interesting boss fights. It makes really, really cool use of the environment in a lot of places as well. So there's sort of sequences. There's a sequence where you're in a Chinese restaurant and you're sort of crawling over this dragon statue that's in the ceiling. So it makes really creative use of camera angles and that kind of thing. So that is one that's well worth checking out. It's not technically a light gun game, but it has a lot in common with that sort of execution. And as an early PS4 game, it came out before PSVR and before the PS4's compatibility with PlayStation Move. So it was a good attempt to kind of resurrect that genre. And it's not a very well-known game, but it's well worth checking out. And it's dead cheap on PSN. I don't think there's a physical version of it, but it's you can get it for like £2 or £3 on PSN. So that's well worth checking out if you have the opportunity to. Like I say, the other stuff that I've done is just VR stuff. So I'm just looking up the ones that I have actually played recently. So Right, there was Mortal Blitz on PS4. PSVR was probably the most striking one. This was one that was powered by Unreal Engine, so it's got really nice graphics. It's got very good sort of character models in it, and it's got that really nice sense of physical presence there as well. So you like, it makes use of the camera to know where you're standing, and you can actually sort of physically duck under objects that are shooting at you and so on. It makes really nice of sort of a bullet time type technique as well. So the concept in this one is you can dual wield guns with 2 move controllers, but you're actually better off wielding one gun in your dominant hand and using your other hand for this sort of it's a sort of electric lasso type thing. And what you can do is when you stun an enemy, you can grab them with this electric lasso and fling them up in the air, at which point the game goes into slow motion. You can just riddle them with bullets as they're flying over your head. And most of your bonus points and combos in the game come from using that mechanic creatively. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really satisfying physical game. The other one that I played around the same time of that and wrote about in the same article is one called Pixel Gear, which was from a Chinese developer called Geronimo Interactive. And this one is sort of uses the voxel style aesthetic, so it's quite a sort of Minecrafty look to it. But this was cool because it's in terms of structure, it's pretty simple. It's all about sort of you standing on a particular place and enemies coming towards you from all directions, and so you need to look around, see where they're coming from, recognize their attack patterns, and then there's boss fights in that are all sort of very pattern recognition based as well. So in terms of structure and execution, that's very traditional, but the fact it's in VR gives it a different twist to it, and that one plays really well as well. So that's Pixel Gear, so that's worth a look if you have the opportunity and the hardware as well. So I think that's sort of all the ones I wanted to bring up for the minute. Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned earlier, that we talked a lot about home light gun games, and
yes,
the reluctance of some people to commit to the additional accessories and stuff. Something I always found interesting when thinking about light gun games is just the fact that essentially they're an arcade experience. So I had written down some interesting light gun games that I enjoyed from the arcades that just were so experiential that they're just not. They never translated well to home, or didn't at all. So like things like Silent Scope.
Yes.
Right, like the home version of Silent Scope are just doo-doo stupid. Like there's no reason to even play them because you didn't have that giant rifle with the screen in the scope. Like nothing compares to Silent Scope in the arcade, where I don't know, maybe some of our younger friends have never played Silent Scope. So the whole thing about Silent Scope is it is a sniper light gun game, and you have a giant rifle, and the scope of the rifle actually has a screen built into it.
Yes.
So if you look at the screen on the arcade cabinet, you're just seeing what a person would see looking out from the rooftop, right? Everything is tiny, and there's a huge vista. When you look into the scope of the rifle accessory you have in your hands there, you actually get a magnified view of wherever that rifle is pointing wherever that rifle is pointing at the large screen on the cabinet, you get the magnified view in your scope, just like a sniper would. Yeah. So the idea is you have to kind of play a combination of looking out at the big screen to kind of situate where you're pointing your rifle, and then when it's time to make your shots, looking into that scope for that view. Yeah. So it's totally just, when you play the home versions, all you have is a reticule, a big circle that is what you would have seen in your scope on the arcade version, and you're just moving that around like a magnifying glass on the screen.
Yes.
And it's dumb. It's like playing one of those I Spy item finder games. It totally takes like all the thrill out of it. So that was an example of one that's kind of arcade only. We talked about Time Crisis a bit. Nothing compares to Time Crisis in the arcades with that massive cabinet and those diamond plate metal freaking steps for the cover mechanic. You could have bought, like I did, a gun with the pedal, but it just never compares. One more I had written down was LA Machine Gunners. Have you ever played LA Machine Gunners?
I haven't, no, but I know they say there's a Wii version of that I really want to get my hands on.
Yeah, it's like the arcade version of LA Machine Gunners is just like another one of those examples of like a massive experience. So the cabinet is tremendous, and the whole setting of LA Machine Gunners is you are one of, in a helicopter, those giant like pintle mounted guns that like hang down. Yeah. So you're operating one of those in a helicopter.
Yeah.
So in the arcade, the full arcade machine, you are standing on a metal platform. The metal platform has rumble built into it to simulate the propeller feedback from being in the helicopter. So you're standing on like unsteady ground. Then you have that giant machine gun that's mounted on a pintle in front of you that you're like swinging around like a madman. And so like, the screen is huge because the whole machine is huge. And it's swinging these dynamic camera angles because it's simulating this helicopter as it pitches and yaws around, and you're moving this massive machine gun around. The machine gun, the power of the vibration motor in the machine gun is ridiculous. Like sometimes it's hard to hold on to. It's like your whole arms are shaking, and all the enemies are sweet robots. So nice. it's just an amazing experience to actually play the arcade version of LA Machine Gunners.
Actually, you're thinking about it. I've got a couple of arcade exclusive games that I wanted to bring up that so that you've reminded me of. So the first one is Lucky and Wild. Did you ever play that?
Is that like weird jungle one from Sega?
No, this was a
that's Jumbo Safari.
Yeah, this was a 1992 game by Namco, and it was a hybrid of driving game and light gun shooter.
Oh, didn't one person do the gun and one person had to drive? Or
so one person had to drive and shoot,
okay.
and the other person had to just shoot. So it was supposed to be like a buddy cop game. So it was inspired by Tango and Cash and Starsky and Hutch and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they did that with the Starsky and Hutch game on the PS2. They recreated that.
Yeah. So the actual cabinet for this was like a big screen with like a sort of hydraulic car cabinet. So one person would sit in the driving seat. They'd have the steering wheel and the pedals and stuff. But they'd also have there was a gun that was like hard mounted on the dashboard.
Okay.
That they could like tilt around and aim that way. And then the other person had like a standard wired light gun that they could shoot at the screen. So. Some people apparently played this 3-player, but this is regarded as an unofficial variant where you'd have one person driving, one person sitting in the middle manning this first gun, and then a third person manning the other gun. Or there were some people who would drive and they'd fire both guns at the same time. So there were lots of different ways you could play, but technically it was a 2-player game. But yeah, it was sort of like an early sprite scaling based driving game where you drive around various ridiculous situations and have to shoot things while you were doing that. So it kind of blended bits of Chase HQ in there, so you'd have to sort of chase down criminals and shoot them. But there were loads of really ridiculous set pieces like driving through a mall in your car and that sort of thing. So that was a really cool one. The other one I want to bring up is actually a more recent one that I only came across like last year or so. It was apparently released in 2012. But it's another Namco game actually. So Namco were clearly the king of these weird experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of Dark Escape 4D?
No.
Dark Escape 4D. Oh, this is incredible. So me and my wife, we went on holiday like last year to a seaside town called Bournemouth that's quite near us. And here in the UK, the seaside has always been pretty much the only place you'll find amusement arcades. If you find an amusement arcade anywhere else, it'll be like just slot machines and stuff like that. So you'd go to the seaside if you wanted arcades. And I was very pleased to discover that although arcades are dying all over the place, all over the world, you can still go to Bournemouth and go and play arcade games on the pier, on the seafront. And one of the games I saw here was this massive, massive cabinet called Dark Escape 4D. And it was set up in such a way that you couldn't see the screen. There was like a sort of curtain you had to go through to get into it, like a photo booth. And yeah, it was just obviously this horror-inspired game. So there was like a sort of silhouette of a woman up against a window at the back, sort of trying to get out or something like that. And you get in there, and it's a sit-down light gun shooter. So you sit in this seat, you have a gun, but it has like surround sound in there. It has a seat that vibrates. It has air cannons that blast smells at you while you're playing. And on the grip of the gun, there is a heart rate sensor. So as you are playing the game and your heart rate is jumping around, things will happen in the game to make you panic more. And so if you're playing it multiplayer as well, it will sort of compare who panicked the most during the game. It's blasting you with these smells and air all the while, and yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
I think the new House of the Dead is kind of like this. It's one of those like contained cabinets.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a fantastic experience. So if you happen to see one of these cabinets in the wild, then jump in there and have a go. The game itself doesn't last very long if you're as bad at light gun games as I am. But yeah, it's worth it for the experience, just to see how much effort they've put into making something that could only be done in the arcade.
For my American friends, it appears that Dave & Buster's is quite fond of having these machines.
Yes. I just saw that from a casual Google search. So, yeah, that's the place to go if you want to play Dark Escape 4D.
Cool. Yeah, so much. I could just list titles. You know, there's just so much fun to be had with the light gun stuff.
Oh, yeah, one more. Yeah, I won't keep us all day, but yeah, one more. There was Rail Chase. You remember that?
No, I don't know that one.
I think that might have been a Sega game, actually. Let me just look it up. Rail Chase. Yes, this was from Sega. This was sort of early 90s, and this was like when Sega was big into doing its hydraulic cabinets and so on.
Oh, sure.
This one, the idea was you were sort of riding like a minecart. I forget if this one was actually a light gun shooter, but it was certainly executed like a light gun shooter. Looking at the pictures, it looks like it might actually have just been joysticks and you're moving sights around on the screen. But the big thing with it is you sat on a bench with you and a friend if you're playing two-player, and like the whole thing was like jolting you around and tipping you around in sync with what was happening on the screen at the same time. So yeah, that was cool. So it was designed to be a motion ride as much as it was a shoot 'em up. So.
This YouTube footage is making me ill. This is awesome.
Yeah, so that's quite an old one, but again, if you have the chance to play on a working model of those, then highly recommended. Very
cool. I will mention one more too, because I have to mention at least one weird super Japanese game. So, not a weird arcade-specific experience, but I want to just bring up Elemental Gearbolt.
Oh, yes.
Because Elemental Gearbolt is delightful. So, Elemental Gearbolt was designed by Alpha Systems, who are perhaps better known for their their top-down shooters, the Shikigami no Shiro series, the Castle of Shikigami. And it is a pretty typical light gun shooter, but atypical in its setting, which is this really kind of dark, broody fantasy setting. It's almost reminiscent of Panzer Dragoon, like really weird alien structures and technology everywhere.
Okay.
And the big hook is that your gun is shooting magic.
Okay.
Right, so you can cycle between elements. And so like the kind of main gameplay hook is understanding like the enemy weaknesses and cycling through the different elements for your magic shots. There's a leveling system based on your score chaining, and just a general strong emphasis on story, because this wasn't an arcade game at all.
Yeah,
it was for home. So there's animated cinematics. There's just a strong emphasis on the atmosphere and the story and the presentation. It was localized in the U.S. by Working Designs.
Ah, that's why I know.
Which would give you kind of an idea of kind of what kind of game it is. Super anime. It's perhaps most famous for the most special edition of it is one of the most expensive games on the collector's market, because Working Designs made a Assassin's edition that was only available, I think, at like a convention. It was like only available like at E3 or something ridiculous, and there was only like 40 or something of them ever made, and it comes in a metal case with the game, a gold-plated gun con and gold-plated memory card. And they're not actual gold, they're just made of that like, you know, like that chrome gold plastic. But on the collector's market, it's one of like the things like that goes for like thousands.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, I don't think that came out here because a lot of working design stuff didn't make it over here for one reason. I think the only one that sort of really got any traction was Alundra, but I don't think that came out over here. But yeah, when you mentioned this, I was trying to think where I knew the name from, and I had it in my mind that this was just a traditional shooter for some reason, but I think I was getting it muddled up with something else.
Yeah, it's worth just to look footage up to see how radically different the presentation and the setting is from every other light gun game you've ever played, essentially.
Yeah, definitely.
The characters you play as are, like, the story in this game's, like, super tragic and stuff, but, like, you basically play as these twin girls who were like killed in like one of like the war conflicts, and their like bodies were like modified and then like revived from the dead as like witch cyborgs that like shoot like elemental magic. So you're basically playing as like reanimated cyborg corpses, like trying to navigate like this like fantasy anime like conflict with your magic gun. It's really crazy.
Kind of reminds me slightly of Astro, the story of that. I know that's mech rather than magic, but yeah, the concept of that, sort of people being resurrected as weapons, sounds a very similar concept to that.
Okay. But yeah, Elemental Gearbolt, that's my weird game for the episode.
Sounds good. Alright, shall we wrap that up there then?
Yes.
Okay, so, as always, would you like to tell people where to find you on the internet?
Sure. I'm always at MrGilderPixels.com or on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram as Mr. Gilder Pixels. Just come check out. I'm always posting work in progress of my latest artwork and stuff, so I'd love to hear from you guys.
Excellent. And as always, you can find my articles on MoeGamer.net. You can find my YouTube channel. You may be watching this on YouTube. If you're listening on SoundCloud, there'll be a link to the YouTube channel down in the description of this episode. You can also see what I'm up to on Atari A to Z.wordpress.com, which collects together my YouTube videos of Atari 8-bit and ST games, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, where I'm cataloguing the games of the Philips VideoPack G7000 computer. I got those words in the wrong order, but never mind. Or Magnavox Odyssey 2, Americans will know that as. As always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.